The rocks tumbled to the ground, sending a shockwave rippling through the air, carrying gravel and smoke with it. The passage to the outside world had collapsed. Orlando threw himself forward, rolling onto the ground, narrowly escaping another injury. "Catherine!" he roared, pushing himself up. Willard and the thin wizard beside him wore grim expressions. They had seen it. Catherine had deliberately struck the rocks above the passage, sealing off their escape. Her gaze flickered, unreadable, as she turned away. Orlando's fury ignited. He thrust out his hand, summoning an earthen spike aimed directly at Catherine's heart. A fireball materialized before her in an instant, intercepting the attack. Boom! The impact sent fragments of rock and embers scattering in all directions. Orlando's expression darkened, magic swirling in his palms, preparing for another assault. "Fools!" Catherine sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. Orlando faltered, blood surging to his face. "You!" Willard and the thin wizard shared his anger, but Catherine remained composed. "The black-maned boar king inside is as powerful as a senior apprentice. If I hadn't collapsed the passage, none of us would have survived," she stated coldly. "Besides, you were standing right next to the exit. Are you really telling me you couldn't have escaped in time?" Her words struck a chord. The black-maned boar was too fast. Any apprentice caught in its charge would be slaughtered. Willard's anger faded, logic swaying him to Catherine's side. The thin wizard remained silent, but his lack of objection spoke volumes. Only Orlando still seethed. "Colin is still alive," he suddenly shouted. The room fell into a heavy silence. The rap school had strict punishments for apprentices harming each other. If Catherine's actions were revealed, she would suffer consequences, no matter how justified she believed them to be. Willard's expression twisted as a terrible suspicion dawned on him. Without hesitation, he lunged forward. Orlando and the thin wizard followed, but Catherine stopped abruptly, turning to face them with a mocking smile. They barely took 2 steps before the air around them thickened, turning viscous. Their limbs felt trapped, as though embedded in amber. Try as they might, they couldn't move an inch. "You!" Orlando's eyes widened in horror. Realization hit them like a blow. Catherine had never intended to let them live. Her pale complexion deepened as the crystal in her palm crumbled to dust. A fireball the size of a human head appeared above her, streaking toward the cave's ceiling. Boom! Rocks cracked and tumbled, the cave trembling under the collapse. Dust filled the air as massive boulders plunged downward, sealing their fate. Orlando shouted in fury, but this time, despair tainted his voice. Willard desperately grasped a piece of witchcraft crystal, sweat pouring down his face as he tried to cast a spell. The thin wizard stood rigid, silent rage boiling within him. His mind flashed back to an old humiliation, Catherine's scorn in the west of the city. His anger surged, eyes burning as blood dripped from the corners of his eyes. This veiled witch. Crack! The passage caved in, rocks crashing down in an unstoppable cascade. Catherine exhaled, carefully sweeping the last remnants of witchcraft crystal into her palm. She had been meticulous, ensuring no evidence remained. The fireball shockwave had done the work. There would be no visible traces of intentional sabotage. She sighed. This plan had exhausted the last of her resources, her precious tools from early adventures now completely depleted. But it had been necessary. The black-maned boar king was too fast. Only by trapping it could she be certain of escaping. If it had followed them, no one would have survived. She felt no remorse for the others. Their fates had never been her concern. The only regret? Orlando and the others had not been crushed along with the passage. A sudden noise snapped her from her thoughts. A voice, twisted with rage, echoed through the dust-filled air. "You masked devil!" Catherine smirked, unbothered. The rocks were moments from sealing the tunnel. His words were nothing more than dying echoes. But then a warning prickled at her senses. Flames burst to life around her, forming protective halos. Silence. Her breath slowed as she turned her gaze toward the collapsing passage. And then she saw it. Orlando and Willard, frozen in despair, awaiting death. But the thin wizard, the quiet, unassuming deacon of the Chiwen gang, was different. His eyes locked onto hers, filled with something unnatural. A sickly green glow emanated from his irises, his flesh writhing like liquid waves beneath his skin. His body cracked open, yellow fat and dark tendrils surging forth, pulsing with unnatural energy. Yet, through it all, his face remained eerily calm. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words that Catherine did not hear, but instinctively understood. "I curse you." The world exploded into dust and debris, silence swallowing the aftermath. Catherine stood alone in the darkness, breath uneven. She shuddered, though the flames around her burned bright. "Evil God," she whispered. She had seen sacrificial rites before, and this was unmistakable. The thin wizard had invoked a god of madness with his dying breath. A chill crawled up her spine. Crazy fool, she spat under her breath. She had underestimated him. She had never expected someone to willingly sacrifice themselves for a curse. And yet he had succeeded. A growing discomfort gnawed at her. She examined her hands. Smooth skin, 5 fingers, no pustules. Yes, everything is normal. Her shoulders relaxed. Communicating with an evil god wasn't so simple. She was fine. She turned, squirming tentacles shifting beneath her form as she crawled forward with an unsettling rustle. Pale moonlight streamed through the cave's entrance, casting a serpentine shadow behind her. The closer she got to the exit, the shorter the shadow became. Then something shifted. The grotesque shadow twisted and writhed, its form melting into a human silhouette. Step, step. Human footsteps echoed, replacing the wet, slithering sounds. Catherine stepped out into the open air, pausing for a moment. She surveyed her surroundings, found her bearings, and, without hesitation, sprinted into the night, her legs strong and human once more. Plop! Colin plunged into the deep pool like an arrow, disappearing beneath the surface of the dark water. Roar! The black-maned boar king followed, its massive body crashing into the pool, sending up towering waves. But it hesitated. The pool, though only a dozen meters wide, was deep, its oval shape plunging sharply downward. The beast's immense size made it powerful, yet clumsy in water. Its natural advantage diminished the moment its hooves left solid ground. It remained near the edge, scanning the water with piercing red eyes. Underwater, Colin's chest tightened. The pool was freezing, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread creeping into his heart. This was the second time he had sought refuge beneath the surface, and he had no idea how much time he had left before the beast found him again. A great night's stamina would allow him to hold his breath for at least half an hour, but that was meaningless if the Boar King spotted him and launched another of its devastating underwater attacks. Colin moved cautiously, circling the pool's depths. He had been searching for an escape route, scouring the cave hall and the water, but every attempt ended in frustration. It was a sealed coliseum of death. His magic reserves were dwindling. If he had to face another enhanced charge from the Boar King, when its body pulsed with dark red patterns, he knew he wouldn't dodge in time. The beast's speed became monstrous in that state. Every attack it launched carried such immense force that even his triple-layer defense had barely kept him alive. The apprentices from the Chiwen gang hadn't been as lucky. His magic was down to 15%. He was reaching his limit. Yet he clenched his jaw. He wasn't done fighting. He had searched the pool before, but without the aid of a light spell, he had been operating in complete darkness. There had to be something, a passage, a hidden tunnel. He had observed the water earlier and noticed something crucial. It was clear, not stagnant, which meant there was a current, which meant there was a way out. Roar! The muffled roar of the black-maned Boar King sent fresh ripples through the water. Colin paused, feeling the tremors. The beast was stirring the pond, clouding the previously clear edges with dirt and debris. His time was running out. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly through his nose, and let himself relax. His limbs went slack, his body floating weightlessly like a leaf caught in the current. He focused, tuning out the wild, erratic disturbances caused by the boar. Then, brush! Something different. A faint, steady pull beneath the surface, whispering like a hidden vein through the water. Colin's eyes snapped open. He had found it. Wasting no time, he propelled himself downward, chasing the current's invisible path. Above him, the black-maned boar king stiffened. A sudden flash of light erupted from the depths. Roar! Its eyes flared red, nostrils flaring as ripples spread across the surface. Ah! With a tremendous leap, the beast plunged in, churning the water into a foaming maelstrom. Colin didn't look back. He had no time to. He swam with all his might, searching desperately for an opening in the rock walls around him. The pressure of the water shifted. The beast's charge had created a powerful shockwave, sending a surge through the depths, tossing Colin like a ship in a storm. The boar would reach him in seconds. And then, a shadow, a narrow, dark passage. His last chance. With one final, desperate kick, he shot forward like a spear. Bang! The boar collided with the stone floor, its tusks scraping against the rock. A deep, angry rumble vibrated through the water as it twisted its massive body, searching for Colin. In the narrow passage, Colin pressed his hands against the stone walls, steadying himself. A floating orb of light hovered between him and the beast, illuminating the tunnel in an eerie glow. On the other side, the boar stared at him, its blood-red pupils glowing with fury. Bang! The beast reared back and slammed into the passage entrance. Its powerful tusks chipped at the stone, sending chunks of rock spiraling through the water. Colin tensed. If the tunnel wasn't strong enough to withstand the boar's assault, he'd be buried alive. Bang! 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 The cave shook with each impact. Colin gripped a handful of spear darts from his belt and readied himself. The boar stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of shifting water. Then it locked eyes with him again. Now! Colin let 3 spears fly. Phew! At such close range, the black-maned boar king had no time to react. One spear buried itself directly into its massive left eye. Roar! Blood burst into the water, staining it red. Colin didn't hesitate. He followed up with another attack, launching a second spear toward its throat. But this time, the beast moved. The spear struck its neck, but failed to pierce deeply. Then, without warning, the black-maned boar king sank into the depths. Colin held his breath, gripping another spear. Silence. He waited. 1 second. 2. 5. Where was it? His thoughts raced. Should he follow? Or was it lying in wait, ready to ambush? He couldn't risk moving blindly. Slowly, cautiously, he swam toward the passage entrance, scanning his surroundings. He needed to confirm whether the beast was truly dead. He emerged from the tunnel, eyes darting through the dark water. Nothing. The cave walls created too many blind spots. Colin narrowed his gaze. He had one more trick. Ah! A small ball of light drifted from his fingertips, floating outward. He watched and waited. Nothing happened. The water was still. All was calm.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Can't wait any longer. Colin thought to himself. The time he can stay in the water is always limited, and he can't waste time like this. He gritted his teeth, took out a spear, and held it in his hand. He kicked off his legs and slowly swam out of the passage. As soon as he came out of the passage, he quickly glanced around, focusing on the place directly below where the giant pig had dived. By the white light of illumination, he clearly saw a huge creature lying on the bottom of the tan directly below him, silent and lifeless. A burst of ecstasy suddenly surged into Colin's heart. The black-maned giant pig king is dead? After the ecstasy, there was a deep fatigue that almost made him faint. It took him a while to calm down his excitement and joy. Then he slowly adjusted his posture and swam toward the water. But as soon as I kicked my legs, a warning sign suddenly came. Colin subconsciously glanced under him. His expression changed drastically, and he quickly turned around and swam toward the secret passage. The black-bristled giant pig king at the bottom of Tan D now had countless red veins appearing on its body, and as the red veins lit up, it began to slowly return to life. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of heartbeats like drums spread rapidly through the water, making Colin's heartbeat inexplicably accelerate. He once again refreshed his understanding of the healing power of the black-maned giant boar king. While swimming, he was not idle, but tried to shoot spears to interrupt the black-maned giant pig king. But the light-up of the red veins has already reached a perverted level in its self-healing ability. The big holes caused by the spears often healed and returned to their original appearance within a second. At this time, Colin also realized the limitations of the spear. When facing such a large creature, the knuckle-sized spears that I customized had great penetrating power, but their lethality was not satisfactory. Roar! Came the dull roar of the black-maned giant pig king. I don't know how it can roar in the water, but no matter what, he has no time to think about this anymore. Wow! The impact of water suddenly came from beneath me. The secret passage was right in front of him. Colin kicked his legs violently. In the end, he passed by the black-maned giant boar king and almost returned to the secret passage again. Bang, bang, bang. Colin touched the stone wall of the secret passage, his heart beating violently. He turned around and looked back. Although he was one-eyed, he was still full of vigor and vigor. He sighed slightly in his heart. Then he no longer hesitated, turned around, and swam deeper into the passage. The passage under the pool is deep and narrow. The rock walls on both sides have strange erosion patterns, and the water in the pool is freezing cold. Colin rode his strong arms, maintained a constant speed, and swam forward with all his strength. Even with the white light of the light spell, the bottom of the passage ahead is still not visible. At the end of his vision, there was always only darkness. Colin calmed down and tried to force himself not to think too much. At this time, what you fear most is often not the danger from the outside world, but your own inner collapse. When a person reaches a desperate situation, the difficulties and obstacles he encounters are actually not terrible. What is truly terrible is the loss of hope. There is not much magic left, and there are no conditions in the water to restore it. With a thought, Colin slightly reduced the strength of the steel armor and Hope's defensive force field. Although since he went to Tan, he has not seen any living creature in the water except the giant black-maned pig. But no one can be sure that there is no danger ahead. While taking into account basic defense, you still have to retain some magic power to deal with sudden crises. Just as he was thinking this, the passage in front of him suddenly became narrower. It suddenly shrunk from its original diameter of more than 1 meter to only about 70 centimeters. Colin's heart sank, and he gritted his teeth and continued swimming forward. The narrow space prevented him from spreading his arms, so he could only rely on his feet to kick forward. After another while, Colin gradually stopped. It's not that he has no physical strength, it's that there is no way ahead. Under the white light of the lighting technique, the entire wall at the end of the passage ahead was solid and clearly visible. Colin couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. But soon, he gritted his teeth again, and the clear outline of his masseter muscles appeared on his face. An inexplicable anger suddenly surged into my heart. He will never give up before the end. He continued to swim forward and came to the wall. At this time, wow! The sound of water suddenly came from behind. In this deep passage, something was swimming towards him. Colin's expression froze, and he quickly turned over and squeezed the spear in his hand, ready for battle. After a while, with the white light of the light spell, Colin could clearly see the appearance of the incoming creature. In the wider passage behind him, a fish-like, snake-like monster with a smooth, white body and a large ring-shaped mouth appeared on its head. The body is about 1 meter thick, and it seems that it cannot fit into the narrower passage on his side. As he expected, the monster got stuck where the passage narrowed. Hiss! It opened its layered ring-shaped mouth and roared silently. Ah! Colin seized the opportunity and fired several spears at it. Phew! Hiss! The metal spear hit, and the monster let out a silent scream of pain. Immediately afterwards, ah! A ball of yellow-green colloid filling the entire passage suddenly shot towards him. There was no way to avoid the narrow passage. Colin's eyes narrowed, and he increased the output of defensive witchcraft. The yellow-green gel quickly swallowed him up, causing the aura of defense against witchcraft to waver. Then it continues to move under the action of kinetic energy and comes into contact with the stone wall behind it. Just made contact. Laugh! The sound of violent corrosion suddenly sounded. The stone wall behind him and the passage wall in contact with the gel were dissolving rapidly. Seeing this, Colin couldn't help but increase the output of defensive witchcraft. At the same time, he moved slightly to escape the range of the yellow-green gel. Thanks to Hope's defensive force field, he did not have direct contact with the yellow-green colloid, but the amazing corrosiveness still shocked him. As he moved, he turned his head slightly and looked at a circle of passages, which were covered with strange erosion patterns. Perhaps this passage was opened by this monster. He silently speculated in his mind, but didn't listen in his hand. He took out his spear and shot at the monster again. Hiss! The monster's roar sounded again, but unfortunately it was limited by the width of the passage and could not directly contact Colin. Aha! A larger ball of yellow-green colloid than before spurted out of its mouth. Like a sharp file, wherever it flew, the passage suddenly widened. Colin's expression changed. He raised the spear and continued to shoot at the monster. At this time, click! There was the sound of the stone wall collapsing behind him. Then the water surged, as if some obstruction had been opened. No way! Colin's eyes lit up, and he quickly looked back. At the end of the passage, which was originally a dead end, a large hole was eroded by the yellow-green colloid. Seeing this, Colin couldn't help but feel ecstasy on his face. But he was in no hurry to leave. Turning around, he looked at the white monster in front of him that was constantly pouring blood. It happened to be a favorable terrain right now, and the passage was narrow, so the white monster couldn't pass. If you don't take the opportunity to kill it, after a while it will corrode and widen the channel, and it will be able to move freely, but it will not have such a comfortable output space. Colin took out several spears and pondered them carefully. After a while, the maximum power of the arrow shooting technique drives several metal spears to burst out and move forward at high speed in the water. Phew! Hiss! The white monster screamed in pain, and blood filled the air and spread. Then gradually lost his voice. Under the illumination of the light spell, the white monster floated quietly in the water, and its head was shattered by the spear. Looks dead, but just in case, Colin fired several more spears at the strange fish, and did not stop until his body was broken into several pieces. After doing this, he turned around and quickly drilled into the large hole eroded by the stone wall behind. The soft white light of the light spell illuminates the surrounding area. He walked through the gaping hole created by erosion. Next moment, expressing ecstasy. Wow! A gray and white stone room converted from a cave. Silence reigned, except for the sound of the water flowing in the pool. Next to the deep pool, an unconscious figure was lying. After an unknown amount of time, his eyelashes fluttered and he slowly opened his eyes. The next second, Colin immediately jumped up and stood upright. His eyes were fixed on the broken pyramid-shaped building not far away. As he moved, the blood scabs on his body scattered like catkins. The abnormality on his body caught him off guard, and he couldn't help but feel suspicious. He quickly raised his arm to check it back and forth, but he didn't notice anything strange. All he saw was smooth and flat skin. But Colin's heart did not relax. Instead, a layer of gloom enveloped him. Suddenly, as he looked at the fallen blood scabs, he seemed to think of something. He took out a spear, pointed it at his arm, hesitated, and then struck hard. Under the action of the sharp spear, a wound appeared instantly. But the next second, before the blood could gush out, the wound healed in the blink of an eye. Colin was startled. Although he was a great knight, such a healing speed was obviously not something he could possess. He stopped where he was, feeling himself carefully. There is a constant cooling feeling between the eyebrows, which promotes a spiritual uplift. At the same time, a warm feeling came from the heart, strengthening the body. Colin looked uncertain, remembering what happened just now. Not long ago, he successfully killed the white monster, passed through the large erosion hole, and found this pool. At that time, the time I could hold my breath had almost reached its limit. No time to think too much. He swam desperately toward the water. After emerging from the water, what we saw was the current stone chamber that should have been transformed from a cave, and the pyramid-shaped stone platform standing alone in the middle. After setting foot on Tambien, he just took a slight step. In an instant, an invisible repulsive force suddenly came from the pyramid-shaped stone platform as the center. With a swish, he was pushed back into the pool. Amidst the splashing sound of falling water, he heard the crunching sound of the pyramid-shaped stone platform collapsing. Following the sound, a golden four-leaf clover appeared in the broken pyramid. Then a burst of strange fragrance suddenly reached the tip of my nose. Suddenly, an indescribable hunger came from every cell in the body. It's as if the soul is hungry. The saliva secreted uncontrollably, and he didn't even have time to swallow. Soon, it overflowed from his mouth and dripped down his chin into the puddle. Then his consciousness darkened, and he was now. It looks like he has obviously swallowed the golden four-leaf clover. Colin recovered his thoughts. There is no trace left of the fresh wound on his arm, but the strange feeling coming from the center of his eyebrows and heart continued. This was obviously brought about by the golden four-leaf clover that was originally hidden in the broken pyramid stone platform not far ahead. No, that is definitely not an ordinary golden four-leaf clover. But soon he shook his head again. Golden four-leaf clover, as the name suggests, is a four-leaf clover that seems to be made of gold. Each of its heart-shaped leaves, and even the rhizomes, are bright golden. When exposed to the outside world when mature, little bits of gold powder will spill out between virtual and real. When taking it, you don't need to swallow it. Instead, you need to place it a finger's distance in front of your eyebrows, and then mobilize your mental power to capture the gold powder. It spreads between reality and reality, just like capturing magic energy during meditation. It is a rare magic potion, but it is not a natural creation, but was cultivated by an unknown wizard a long time ago. Therefore, unlike naturally bred exotic flowers and exotic herbs, they may have various side effects or strict taboos. Golden four-leaf clover does not have any side effects or contraindications. The only drawback may be that it is only effective for formal wizards and below. But this flaw is not worth mentioning compared to its effect. Its effect is also very simple. There is only one. That is strengthening the soul. You know, it is not an easy thing to improve your soul, except for a few rare magic potions like golden four-leaf clover. If a wizard wants to improve his soul, he can only cross every major realm. For example, from a wizard apprentice to a formal wizard, from a first-level wizard to a second-level wizard, etc. Only then can you get a strengthening promotion. Of course, every soul improvement brought by advancement is a qualitative leap, and the effect of the golden four-leaf clover is not that powerful, but not too weak. What if he took the real golden four-leaf clover? Then the fastest is 1 week, and the latest is 2 weeks, until golden clover is completely absorbed. At that time, not only will his wizard qualifications be upgraded from at least the 4th level to the 3rd level, but even to the 2nd level. And with the strength of his soul, he may become the first person on the island besides the Lap Wizard. After Colin recalled what he had learned about the golden four-leaf clover, he couldn't help but shake his head. What if he took the real golden four-leaf clover? So where does this strange energy in the heart come from? There is also the powerful self-healing ability brought by the energy in the heart. Sighing slightly in his heart, he shook the useless doubts out of his mind and slowly approached the pyramid stone platform. No matter how, the sense of strengthening coming from the body and soul was not deceptive, and nothing strange appeared on the gold paper. Optimistically speaking, maybe the golden four-leaf clover is an enhanced and improved version. After all, this looks like a place dedicated to cultivating that peculiar golden four-leaf plant. The broken pyramid stone platform was obviously a special device used for cultivation. He gradually approached the broken pyramid stone platform. The pyramid stone platform is about 3 meters high and made of gray stones. It is now broken in the middle. The gray stones look very ordinary, with no special textures or special symbols. Thinking of this, the same question came to his mind again. Where exactly is this place? He gradually stopped and stood on the edge of the stone platform, looking up and around. It is surrounded by smooth walls, and there is no exit in sight. This question obviously cannot be answered now. Colin looked at the stone platform next to the pool again, and a suspicion suddenly emerged in his mind. The white strange fish probably eroded the long passage just because it knew about the existence of the golden four-leaf clover. He walked around the stone chamber a few more times, but still couldn't find any exit. Colin sighed. He had already planned for such an outcome, so he didn't find it difficult to accept it. His plan is to wait here for a while longer, then return to the previous cave hall again. It was hoped that Holt and others had returned successfully and killed the giant black-maned pig. The success rate seems to be low, but in fact, there is a high probability that Holt and others will return again. After all, even if you don't care about the corpse of the apprentice in the cave hall, there are still so many valuable black-maned giant boar corpses inside. These are magic stones, and you won't give up so easily. Colin looked around at the stone chamber in front of him again and sighed. I don't know who built this stone chamber, and how he cultivated such a special golden four-leaf clover. Of course, looking at the layer of blood scab falling on the ground, he secretly thought he was lucky. Just by looking at this layer of blood scab, you can clearly understand the danger just now. Although this special golden four-leaf clover has a powerful effect, it is also much more dangerous than the ordinary four-leaf clover. If it weren't for being a great knight, I probably wouldn't be able to survive it. While thinking about it, Colin used the cleaning technique and the fireball technique to clean up the traces of the stone chamber, and also burned his own blood scab to ashes, destroying the corpse and eliminating traces. Then he waited a long time to adjust his condition before jumping into the water again and swimming towards the previous cave hall. Wow! In the cave hall, a cluster of water suddenly rose from the calm pool, and a figure faintly emerged. Who? The face of the city guard who was in charge of cutting up the carcass of the black-maned giant pig changed drastically. The two wizards standing nearby also tensed up. This is a dark forest, and there is no room for them to be careless. Don't be nervous. Colin came to the shore, stood by the pool, raised his triangle badge, and said slowly. The triangular badge the size of a table tennis ball was glowing silver in his hand. The expressions of the two wizards on the opposite side softened slightly. The school's badges are bound one-to-one, and only I can inspire this silver-white brilliance. Is Wizard Holt still here? Colin asked again. Leave the stone room and return to the water pool. It was exactly as he thought. The giant black-maned pig that forced him into a desperate situation had been killed by Holt and the two men, and the passage connecting the cave hall had been reopened. Even now, there are city guards in the cave hall breaking down and carrying the carcass of the black-maned giant pig. It seemed that more time had passed than he thought. After all, the stone chamber is isolated from the world, and there is no light, so it is difficult to detect the specific passage of time. Wizard Holt should be in the city now. A wizard on the left in front of him replied, and then he paused and said, You must be Colin. Everyone thought you were dead. Colin smiled and didn't explain much. He just nodded to them and said, I have to go find Captain Holt, so I won't disturb your work for now. 40 minutes later, the guard station in the west of the city. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Colin knocked on the wooden door of a room on the second floor. Please come in. A familiar voice came. Colin pushed open the door and entered. Holt was sitting behind a black wooden table, basking in the sun. Colin. Seeing him, Holt couldn't help but express surprise. Although Colin's body was not found in the cave hall, he did not have high hope that Colin was alive. Captain. Colin nodded to him calmly. Although the wizard's robe was constantly cleansed, it was still dry, but the corners were already somewhat tattered. His half-length blonde hair was still wet and a little embarrassed. It seems that you have a lot to say to me, Holt said slowly after looking around at Colin. Next, Colin told Holt in detail what happened before. Of course, the contents of the stone chamber are hidden. He just said that he relied on the witchcraft of suspended animation and hid in a pool to escape. After listening to Colin's story, Holt frowned slightly and said, "So you were saying that when you were confronting the giant black-maned boar, Catherine and others took the opportunity to escape and blew up the passage?" "I'm not entirely sure whether they blew up the passage, but I speculate that it is likely the case." Colin explained calmly. "Do you know that Orlando, Willard, and Baleka the Chiwin gang are all dead?" After a moment of silence, Holt suddenly asked, "Everyone except Catherine is dead?" Colin was a little surprised. Holt continued earnestly, "I'm happy that you can survive. As long as you survive, no one will care how you survive." Colin looked confused and looked at Holt doubtfully. Holt frowned, sighed, and simply stated clearly, "Catherine is the exact opposite of what you're saying, you know? Everything I said is true." Colin emphasized in a deep voice. Colin. Holt shook his head to stop him. His tone was no longer gentle, and he said in a deep voice, "If according to what you said, the 3 senior intermediate apprentices were half disabled by the black-maned giant boar, then how can you still be alive and kicking? How can you confront the black-maned giant boar with your own strength?" Colin hesitated for a moment and was about to explain, but Holt interrupted him again. "Catherine said that it was because of your nervousness that the formation was disrupted. Then the giant black-maned boar knocked you away, and at the same time the roof of the cave collapsed. Under the chain reaction, a large part of the cave roof collapsed one after another. Willard and others were frightened by the black-maned giant pig and did not have time to escape. In the end, only Catherine survived by chance." Holt gradually calmed down, turned around and looked at Colin. His tone softened slightly. "Colin, you have just advanced. Inexperienced in combat, it is normal to be nervous in battle. No one will blame you. There is no need for you to make up this excuse." Colin was stunned, and a large number of complicated thoughts flashed through his heart. He didn't expect that Catherine would complain first, and Orlando and the others would actually die. Could it be that Catherine killed Orlando and the others? As if a blessing came to his mind, this speculation emerged in his mind. But now is not the time to dwell on such things. His eyes flashed, and with a clang, he pulled out the bean needle from his waist. Holt raised his eyebrows, but he didn't care. But the next second, his pupils shrank slightly. Colin raised his arm and stabbed the thin sword in his hand hard at the palm of his raised left hand. Ding! The bean needle collided with the palm of his left hand, making a sound like gold and stone hitting each other. Colin continued to exert force, and the bean needle gradually bent under the strong force. He did not let go until it bent to 90 degrees. Then he looked up at Holt with a calm expression. Holt wasn't angry either. He looked at Colin's intact left hand and was really shocked. He knew that Colin was the Grand Knight. The Great Knight is the pinnacle of the Knight system, although it is nothing compared to the Wizard. But this is only because the Knight's attack methods are too single and his own defense is average. In terms of actual attack power, generally speaking, the defensive witchcraft used by intermediate apprentices cannot defend against the full thrust of the Great Knight. After all, it's a stabbing attack, not a slashing attack. Of course, no wizard would be stupid enough to let a Great Knight get close to him. He also saw that Colin used all his strength, and the bean needle was also a rare and good sword. After pondering for a moment, he took the initiative to apologize. "I blamed you wrongly, Colin. Don't worry too much, Captain." Colin responded calmly. "As for Catherine, I will go find her again and ask her." Holt continued to add, with a solemn look in his eyes. Apparently, the suspicion of Catherine also came to mind. Seeing this, Colin didn't add anything more. After a pause, he said goodbye to Holt, then walked towards home. People cannot do things based on imagination. Otherwise, you will not be able to take revenge on the real culprit, and you will easily create unnecessary enemies for yourself. That's why, as soon as he returned to the city, he went to report to Holt first. But now, combined with the information from Holt and his own experience in the cave hall, he was already 80% sure that it was Catherine who destroyed the tunnel and killed 3 people in Orlando at the same time. Although I don't know how Catherine managed to kill 3 people at the same time, the truth of the matter should be close to 10. However, he is not in a hurry to cause trouble for Catherine now. If it is true as he thinks the school will avenge him without him taking action. After doing such a thing, Catherine had no choice but to die. Don't even think about surviving, not even as a slave like Charlie. Of course, if the school cannot do justice to him. Colin's eyes flashed with a glint, and he said quietly in his heart, "Then I can only do it myself." Guard office in the west of the city. In the room on the second floor. Holt did not go directly to Catherine, but paced back and forth in the room, thinking to himself. Although he already believed Colin's words, there was still doubt about this matter. The biggest doubt is, why did the 3 people in Orlando die under falling rocks? According to Colin, it was most likely Catherine who did it. But if she did, how did she do it? This is much harder than killing the 3 of them directly. If he does it, it doesn't matter. But it is a bit unbelievable that Catherine, who is also an intermediate wizard apprentice, wants the 3 Orlandos to die under falling rocks. Maybe Colin wasn't telling the truth either. After thinking for a long time, he secretly speculated. If so, everything would be clear. After all, people are self-interested, and it is normal for their words to be biased towards their own side. However, all this is just speculation now, and the actual situation needs further investigation. On the other side, Colin was walking on the road, walking a little hastily. I don't know how my family is doing after being away for so long. He couldn't wait to get back to his own yard. Of course, the main reason was because he was hungry. When I set out for the dark forest before, I originally brought dry food made by Renee, but later I couldn't eat it because it was soaked in water. It was already the afternoon of the second day, and he was already hungry. Rumble. At this time, thunder suddenly came from the distance. Colin glanced up at the sky. The weather on the island is more unpredictable than in the mountains. It was sunny just now, but now it is gradually becoming overcast with dark clouds. It was about to rain. His pace couldn't help but speed up a bit. When he becomes a senior wizard apprentice and learns flying witchcraft, traveling will not be so hard. Cross the street, turn into an alley, and walk for a few more minutes. Rumble. With a sound of thunder, heavy rain poured down. Colin frowned and continued walking forward. But at the next intersection, he gradually stopped. Click. Blue lightning flashed across, suddenly illuminating the dim world. It also illuminated the veiled figure of a woman in front of Colin. "You're not dead?" the woman asked lightly, seeming a little surprised. But the expression on his face was stiff and strange. A bit like some women in previous lives who had excessive plastic surgery and seemed to have lost control of their facial muscles. "Thanks to you." Colin's expression remained unchanged, and he choked back. "Ho, ho, ho." But what Colin didn't expect was that he finished his sentence. Catherine was stuck in place as if she was dead, with her eyes sometimes angry and sometimes confused, and her mouth kept making ho-ho sounds. "Is she mad at me?" Colin was a little confused for a moment. "Call!" A fireball suddenly shot towards him. "Crazy woman." Colin cursed secretly, but he was already prepared for this and slipped to the side. The fireball passed by his left side along with a wave of heat. Colin took out the metal arrow and was about to fight back. Boom! But he was caught off guard and suffered a heavy blow from behind. After the fireball, which was the size of a human head, passed by him, it turned a corner and hit him again. "Ho-ahem." Catherine coughed violently, and her eyes regained some clarity. After returning to the city, she gradually discovered something strange about herself. She really didn't expect that Chiwen's final curse on Belette would be so vicious. Her condition is getting worse and worse, and now she seems to be unable to bear it anymore. Laugh. There was an undetectable sound in the air. Then there was a pop, and a hole the size of a fist was suddenly blown out of Catherine's abdomen. Ding! The metal arrow remained unabated and stabbed into the stone wall behind her. Puff! Catherine spat out a mouthful of blood, looked down at her wounds, and then looked back at Colin not far away with a look of disbelief. You must know that she didn't hold back just now. Even if she couldn't kill him with one blow, she shouldn't be injured at all. But she had no time to think about it. The serious injuries on his body have broken the temporary balance in the body. Buzz! A strange anger rushed straight into the brain with a manic whisper. The clarity in Catherine's eyes disappeared instantly. replaced by endless madness and anger. Tongue. Dazzling firelight rose from her body, forming a dense halo. The heavy rain was pouring down, but it was unable to extinguish the seemingly thin layer of orange fire. Instead, it was instantly evaporated and dispersed into a circle of white mist. Laugh. At this time, if your hearing is strong enough, you can hear several slight sounds suddenly coming from the air under the cover of the rain. Gray-black spears formed a net in the air and shot toward Catherine one after another. Laugh! The spears successfully passed through the dense circle of orange fire outside Catherine's body, but it had melted into molten iron and was no longer hard. The corresponding penetration power had also decreased. It was blocked by the inner defense and did not cause much damage. Although it has become very hot, for an expert like Catherine who plays with fire, this temperature is obviously nothing. Colin frowned, but quickly opened it, and his pupils shrank. Through the dim light of the fire, he noticed a creepy change in Catherine. TSK. At a street corner behind Colin, a wizard in black robes made a tut through the rain. He turned to his companion next to him and said, "It seems that Berkeley was indeed killed by her curse of flesh and blood. I don't know what this woman did to make Berkeley willing to endure such pain and curse her. No matter what we did, we should go wipe Berkeley's, but now. If the guards come later, it won't end well." The companion next to him responded calmly, "Why are you so anxious? It's raining heavily now. Who will be patrolling outside? That woman's curse is about to break out. That scene is rare to see. Ah, here it comes." His companion looked disgusted, but reluctantly looked away. Through the rain, everything became hazy. Puff! Even Catherine swelled into a huge dark red tumor, and finally exploded and splashed under the curse of flesh and blood. It looks more like a blooming, bloody firework. "It's so beautiful," the black-robed wizard said, intoxicated. "Let's go. Hurry up and deal with that kid. Things will change later. You're just two." The black-robed wizard was about to say something sarcastic, but his voice was stuck in his throat. In the rain curtain not far away, a figure was flying towards him in the rain. Click! Blue and white lightning flashed across the sky. Colin. Holt braved the wind and rain and fell from the sky with a solemn expression. He looked at Colin carefully and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that he didn't look like anything was wrong. "Are you okay?" But he still asked. "No." Colin shook his head, looking very pale. The rain wet his hair and fell down his fair face, making him look a little haggard. He glanced at the puddle of yellow, white, and red minced meat in front of him again and felt sick in his heart. There were actually some tentacles in the minced meat that were trembling constantly, as if they were still alive. This is all that remains of Catherine. Just now, when he was still thinking about how to break through Catherine's defense, he found that she suddenly changed her appearance. Catherine's whole body was like a ball filled with air, and her dark red skin was like a toad, with countless yellowish pustules emerging. Of course, what shocked Colin the most was that for some reason, she had countless smooth tentacles that were either thick, long, or thin. Then there was a bang, blood, and flesh flying. "Don't look over there. Pay attention to your mental state," Holt reminded. Colin's inspiration is high, but his soul is not strong, and he is most easily contaminated by such weird things. He still remembered the way he was stupefied by the radiation he accidentally leaked when he first met Colin. When Colin heard this, his heart trembled, and he nodded with some fear. In this world, many things are best left unseen. He has heard too many examples of such contamination. But soon he changed his mind and realized that he had actually watched it many times, and he didn't feel anything other than nausea. But he has not forgotten the fact that he was stupefied by the radiation that Holt slightly leaked. It seems that this is also the result of the golden four-leaf clover he speculated secretly. Then he raised his head and asked Hall suspiciously, "Captain, why are you here suddenly?" Holt opened his mouth to explain. "Not long after you left, I went to find Catherine, but when I arrived at Catherine's residence, I found no one alive. Moreover, detecting evil also shows that there is a strong aura of evil there. So I followed the evil aura and chased her all the way, and I happened to see Catherine turned into a pool of flesh and blood. This is probably the evil god's pollution. Holt looked solemn, then patted Colin on the shoulder and sighed. Fortunately, you're fine. I was negligent this time and didn't notice anything strange about Catherine. He was really apologetic. A lot of people had died this time. If Colin died due to his negligence, even if I won't be severely punished, I will feel a little sorry. And once again, he felt foolish for his previous narrow judgment. When did my thinking become so fixed? This is not the first time this has happened. Why couldn't Catherine let the 3 Orlandos die in a falling rock? Why didn't Colin tell the whole truth? Don't underestimate others, he secretly warned in his heart. Judging from the traces of battle seen at the scene, whether it was Catherine or Colin, they were all much stronger than he imagined, especially polluters like Catherine, who are usually either very weak or very strong due to the blessing of strange pollution. Catherine is obviously the strong type, and Colin, who can fight her and remain intact, is certainly not a weakling. Aren't there such examples in the past? During his third-class apprenticeship, he spent too much time practicing witchcraft, which led to a slow improvement in his realm. But once advanced, the strength is usually very strong. He also thought about Colin's extraordinarily powerful defensive witchcraft. Perhaps it was because of Colin's practice of this witchcraft that he was promoted so late. Holt understood clearly. He glanced at Colin next to him and said, "If you have nothing to do, go back first. This matter involves the evil god, and I have to report it to Wizard Lapu." "Yes." Colin nodded solemnly, raised his feet slightly, and took a step to the side. Heavy rain poured down, and the gathered rain scattered Catherine's remains, and blood spread to his feet. Holt also noticed it. He frowned and thought. The scattered blood of the wreckage was immediately covered by a semicircular transparent shield. The water flowing from the ground and the rain from the sky are blocked out. After doing this, he continued to urge Colin. "Okay, go back and rest quickly. Well, remember to come to the west of the city to be on duty at night." "Yes, I need to work hard recently. After all, 7 second-class apprentices died, and the manpower on the night watch in the west of the city is very tight." Holt explained and comforted, and then said, "This situation should not last long. Lord Hongyan has already this incident was reported to the Lap Wizard." Holt glanced into the distance, and then said meaningfully, "Perhaps, after a while, there will be big changes in the west of the city." Colin was a little confused, but Holt just shook his head. "Then I'll leave first." He had no choice but to say goodbye to Holt and turn to leave. Before leaving, Colin glanced into the distance inadvertently. The heavy rain like a curtain blurred everything, making it difficult for him to see clearly, but there should be no one there. Looking at Holt, he didn't seem to notice anything strange. Maybe it's an illusion? Colin stopped worrying and turned around and rushed home. Far away, under the eaves, the black-robed wizard sighed and said, "Let's go. There's nothing to see anymore, and Holt can't be eliminated instantly. Go back and report to the adults." "Oh, this is the only way." Fortunately, Berkeley still has some brains and used the curse of flesh and blood. His companion also sighed. The figures of the two people gradually disappeared into the rain. Hua hua hua. The heavy rain fell, and long lines of rain pillars hit the eaves, splashing large water splashes, and then slid down the corners of the eaves. Finally, it blends into the puddles on the ground. Ta! The sound of imperceptible footsteps came. Colin slowly walked out from the corner of the house and glanced around. This is where the sense of peeping came from just now. He originally wanted to go home directly, but as he walked on the road, the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the sense of voyeurism was not an illusion. The golden four-leaf clover gave him extremely keen perception. Even if Holt didn't seem to notice, he shouldn't doubt his own perception, because logically speaking, his current perception may be stronger than Holt, so it is normal to be sharper than him. So he turned a corner and prepared to investigate. Just in case, he secretly took a peek in the distance and found no one before walking over. Now it seems that there are no traces here. Perhaps there were some before, and they were destroyed by the heavy rain. But it's more likely that what was just peeking out here was just an ordinary passerby. He looked around carefully and found nothing, so he stopped thinking about it. However, just in case, he still planned to mention it to Captain Holt later. By the time we got home, the rain had stopped. The ironclad door was unlocked, so Colin pushed it open and walked in. The yard didn't change much from before, except that the stable on the right was empty, and I didn't know where Arthur had gone. On the lawn to the left, Demi is treading water. When she saw Colin, she was slightly stunned. The next second, he quickly ran towards the main building on his short legs. "Sister, the master is back!" shout I. The greeting Colin was about to say was suppressed, and he couldn't help but touch his nose. Soon, the door to the main building was opened, revealing Renee's figure. "Master?" she asked, looking at Colin with a surprised look on his face. "Yes." Colin nodded and asked as he walked into the main building. "Where is Arthur?" Renee led little Demi and followed behind him and replied, "Master, he is waiting for you at the west gate of the city." "How long have you been there?" Colin paused slightly. "I just went there not long ago. He came back for lunch before." Colin nodded, but he didn't expect that he would miss Arthur. "I want to take a shower. Is there any hot water?" "Yes, master." "Not bad." Colin praised with satisfaction. Although he has a cleaning technique, he occasionally takes a bath after returning from work just to enjoy it. Renee was not sure which day he would want to take a bath, so she usually prepared hot water every day. But it was already afternoon, and Renee was prepared to have hot water, which was considered thoughtful. After arriving at the bathroom of the master bedroom on the second floor, Colin waited for a long time before he saw Renee coming up with a basin of hot water with some difficulty. Every time she took a bath, Renee would go up and down the stairs 5 times to get enough hot water. Perhaps she can learn solar breathing. Colin couldn't help but think that although he was only responsible for taking care of him, but in this world, without the aid of various electrical appliances, these tasks are still not easy. If Renee could become a knight, at least it would be more efficient to carry him the bathwater next time. He slowly stepped into the tub and sighed comfortably. However, these are things that will happen later, and now he has no time to teach Renee to practice. After taking a bath, Colin walked out of the bathroom. On the wooden table outside, Renee had laid out a sumptuous, steaming meal for him. Colin sat down and feasted. Compared with when he was under the wizard's leadership, his quality of life now can be said to have been greatly improved. After eating for a while, he suddenly turned to Renee and ordered, "Renee, please wait and call Arthur back. I have to go on duty tonight." "Okay, master." Renee nodded. After dinner, he told Renee not to disturb him, and then went to the basement alone. Locked the iron door from the basement to the first floor. With a thought in his mind, he breathed out the golden paper. Name, Colin Leonard. Level, Intermediate Wizard Apprentice, 3 out of 100. Grand Knight, 30 out of 100. Meditation Method, Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I, 39/100. Solar Breathing Method I, 80/100. Witchcraft, 0 level magic. Slightly, 0 level wizardry. Steel Armor I, 10 out of 100. Arrow I, 11 out of 100. Secondary High Temperature Tolerance, 43 out of 100. Hope's Defense Field, 45 out of 100. Fireball, 49 out of 100. Detect Evil, 31 out of 100. Purify Evil Energy, 26 out of 100. Skill, Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production. Break Limit Point, 0. Colin scanned it carefully from beginning to end, and there was nothing strange about the gold paper. The wizard level has finally increased by 1 point. According to this calculation, the cultivation speed will probably increase a little in 20 days. But this was only the speed before. Now that he has been transformed by Golden Clover, his cultivation speed will most likely change. Colin glanced at the gold paper again. For some reason, he always felt something strange in his heart. He followed the feeling in his heart. I saw a new line of characters quietly appearing behind the meditation method column on the gold paper. Talent, Intermediate Strength, 23/100. Colin was shocked and quickly reacted. This intermediate life-strengthening talent should obviously refer to the powerful self-healing ability brought to him by that unusual golden 4-leaf clover. From this point of view, the most important effect of the golden 4-leaf clover is probably not to strengthen the soul, but to allow the user to gain this life-strengthening talent. Moreover, the energy in the heart has not been completely digested yet. Thinking about it, if it is completely digested later, the intermediate life-strengthening effect may not be the final effect. Of course, what surprised him the most was the intermediate talent on gold paper is the same as other witchcraft or meditation methods, and there is progress behind it. This undoubtedly means that intermediate level strong life can also be forced to improve through practice, and after reaching the limit, you can also break the limit through the limit breaking point. But how should we exercise this talent? A trace of doubt arose in Colin's heart, and he inexplicably thought of his ability to heal himself quickly. Could it be that we need to practice in the form of breaking and then standing? Once such thoughts surfaced, they were out of control. Clang! After hesitating for a while, he resolutely pulled out the bean needle from his waist. He endured the pain and severely cut his arm. The blood solidified instantly before it spilled out, and then the wound gradually closed into a red line, and then the red line slowly disappeared. The arm returned to its intact appearance. Colin exhaled slightly and looked towards the gold paper. The progress behind the intermediate strong life has not moved at all. Maybe it's not enough practice. He wrote again and suddenly realized something was wrong. Even the flashing symbol did not appear after the intermediate level of strong life progress on the gold paper. This is not normal. Due to the effect of the gold paper, no matter what witchcraft or skill it is, as long as he practices it, he will definitely make progress. Corresponding to this is the flashing symbol that will appear behind the corresponding progress on the gold paper every time you practice. And this time he practiced twice, but the gold paper still didn't indicate that he had improved. It seems that the direction of practice is wrong. After thinking for a moment, Colin put down the bean needle and started practicing a limit-breaking solar breathing technique. After completing a set of actions quickly, he looked at the gold paper again. This time, surprise flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the flashing symbol appeared behind 3 items on the gold paper at the same time. In addition to the progress of the Great Night level and the progress of the once-limited solar breathing technique. As he expected, a flashing symbol also appeared after the talent of intermediate power. He gradually became enlightened. The basic logic of the intermediate level strong life that the golden 4-leaf clover brought to him is probably due to his strong vitality, and self-healing is only an external manifestation of it. In other words, he should practice life force, but there is obviously no special technique for this kind of vitality training. Or, in other words, the techniques that can exercise the body, such as solar breathing method, can more or less increase the progress of intermediate life strengthening. A smile gradually appeared on Colin's face. He looked at the time. It was already getting late, and it would be time to go on duty in a while. So I packed my clothes and left the basement. Arthur had also returned by this time. After Colin had a hasty dinner, he went on duty in the west of the city without stopping. The sun sets and the moon rises. In the wooden house on duty, Colin stood by the wooden window. It had just rained heavily in the afternoon, and the stars in the night were twinkling like diamonds, and they were as densely packed and countless as the gravel on the riverbank. But not half of them were familiar to him. For some reason, he felt that tonight was more deserted than before. It seems to be an illusion, but it is not an illusion. Guarding the fields on duty is not voluntary labor, but involves the distribution of interests among different forces. Now that 7 wizards on duty have died all at once, it will be impossible to adjust and replenish manpower in time for a while. Therefore, in the long area that originally consisted of 10 wooden houses, now only he, Holt, and Mallory were left. If you sort the wooden houses from left to right from 1 to 10, as usual, he was in the 7th cabin, and Holt was in the 8th cabin to his right. Mallory was on his left, the 3rd cabin. But tonight, Holt may have a clearer understanding of his strength and wanted him to do something, so he moved a wooden house to the right. The area he was originally responsible for and the area Catherine was responsible for were assigned to Colin. So at this moment, the wooden houses on both sides are empty. However, Colin was not worried about not being able to cope with it. After all, they had almost slaughtered the giant black bristle pigs in the periphery yesterday, and there shouldn't be any more ferocious beasts attacking for a while. Ta-ta-ta. The sound of patrolling footsteps of city guards gradually came. Soon, a group of strong men in armor holding torches appeared in Colin's sight. When the captain of the city guard saw Colin, he paused slightly and bent down to salute. Colin nodded slightly. This captain is the same guard captain who gave him a gift on the first day of duty, so he looks familiar. Seeing him nod, the city guard captain continued to lead the team forward and soon passed the wooden house on duty. Colin also left the window and walked back to the middle of the room to continue practicing. The city guards walked along the field ridges for a while, then turned left and walked into the dark fields along the fixed patrol route. The farther away they were from the cabin where the wizard was on duty, the more cautious their expressions became. Although the stars are bright tonight, the moon is dim, so it can be considered a dark moon and a high wind. I still couldn't see clearly without a torch. Walked for a while. Ah! A black shadow suddenly passed in front of them, carrying the sound of wind. Notice! The guard captain shouted sharply and took out the flare. Clang! The team members behind him unsheathed their swords one after another, looking nervous. Everyone slowly groped forward in the direction where the black shadow was running. It has not yet been determined whether it is a ferocious beast, so flares cannot be fired easily. For a moment, the whole world seemed to be quiet. The only sound left was the whirring of the flames and the nervous pounding of their heartbeats. The city guards gradually approached the black shadow. Under the light of the fire, the leading city guard could clearly see the black shadow in front of them. Damn, it turns out to be a hare. He suddenly cursed secretly, drew his bow, and nocked an arrow. Ah! The wooden arrow spun out and pinned the hare to the ground accurately. The others breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. I don't know when the new wizard will come. The archery city guard complained as he walked towards the hare. Yeah, I always feel uneasy. There are only 3 wizards in such a long area. Can they take care of it? Someone agreed. Well, our place is pretty good. At least there is one wizard. There are many areas where there are no wizards on duty at all. Captain, don't you think so? The guard captain looked calm and did not answer. After the archery team members picked up the hare, they continued to lead the team forward. He didn't stop the team members from continuing to chat. After all, city guards like them risk losing their lives every day on patrol, so it is important to vent appropriately. While walking and chatting, someone suddenly asked, "Actually, why did so many wizards suddenly die? I heard that there seems to be a terrifying monster appearing in the dark forest. A monster that even the wizard can't deal with?" The crowd suddenly fell silent. Don't worry, that monster has been dealt with. The captain of the city guard at the front noticed the conversation and suddenly comforted him, and then added, "Do you remember the giant black pig from before?" Everyone nodded. This is the monster that the wizards encountered in the dark forest. It's just enlarged several times. Then he shared all the news he knew with the team members. Just after sharing, a young team member who had just joined the city guard asked in disbelief, "Captain, your friend is not bragging. Is there really such a big black pig?" The guard captain just smiled and said nothing. His friend personally went to the dark forest to transport the pork, so he couldn't be lying. The young team member didn't care. He just sighed. The giant black-maned pig that appeared in the field was already bigger than he imagined, but he didn't expect that there would be even bigger ones. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something and asked again, "Captain, isn't the wizard on duty in our area a new wizard who has just advanced? Why was it that only he and 2 other senior wizards survived?" The guard captain shook his head and said, "I don't know, but no matter how you survived, since you can survive, you must be exceptional. At least it is superior in life-saving." He paused and said, "According to my friend, when he was decomposing the giant pig carcass, he happened to encounter the wizard coming out of the pool, and he was quite frightened." Hiding in the pool? After a while, someone murmured in a low voice. The people on patrol had many thoughts, but no one paid attention to him, and the conversation was discontinued. The captain of the guard was also a little worried. He inexplicably thought of what Colin hinted to the team members on the day he arrived. Having a strong life-saving ability does not mean that you are strong. After a while, he seemed to feel that the atmosphere was too silent, so he spoke again. "There is no need to worry too much. The wizards have killed all the giant pigs this time. There should be no more giant pigs coming. But even if there are no giant pigs, there are still other ferocious beasts. Wasn't there no giant pigs before?" A team member retorted in a low voice. The captain of the guard also noticed the flaw in his words and remained silent for a moment. After a while, he sighed. "Anyway, pay attention to safety recently." Just in the middle of what he said, he suddenly shut up, raised his hand to signal everyone to be silent, then tilted his head slightly and pricked up his ears. Click, click, click. A slight sound came from the dark forest not far away. It seemed to be the sound of branches breaking, and it sounded like something was constantly crashing in the forest. And it seemed to be getting closer. The guard captain's expression changed slightly, and he took off the flare from his waist. Ah! The next second, a giant pig with black manes suddenly jumped out of the dark forest. Even though it was difficult to see clearly due to the darkness, its huge body could be recognized without having to see it clearly. "Back off!" The guard captain looked calm, and while giving orders to his team members, he quickly fired the flare in his hand. Whoosh! Flares shot into the sky. Ouch! A ferocious wolf howl suddenly sounded. Boom! Bright flares exploded in the air. With the light shed by the signal bomb, the city guards could clearly see the scene in front of them. Behind the panicked giant pig with black manes, there were actually 8 or 9 giant gray wolves that were only slightly smaller than the giant pig. Among them, walking at the end of the pack, was an extraordinary white giant wolf. At this time, it was looking at the city guards with human eyes. "Run away!" The captain of the city guard suddenly felt something bad. He shouted loudly and took the lead in fleeing towards the wooden house where Colin was. The Wolf King has discovered them, and who knows if he will treat them as a snack on a whim. Ouch! The worst outcome happened. Under the command of the Wolf King, the wolf pack separated into 2 gray wolves and chased them in their direction. The guard captain's pace couldn't help but become a little faster. But as he ran, he suddenly noticed something strange. After subconsciously scanning the surroundings, his expression changed drastically, and he shouted hurriedly, "Come back! Don't run anywhere else!" He never expected that 1/3 of the team members would foolishly choose to run to the wooden house further away, where Wizard Holt was on duty. What he didn't expect was that after hearing his stern shouting, one of the team members who was originally staying next to him gritted his teeth and suddenly turned around and ran towards the wooden house where Wizard Holt was on duty further away. He was anxious and angry. Madness. He understood what the team members were thinking, but he just felt that Colin couldn't handle these giant wolves. But they don't even think about it, even if Colin is as weak as they thought. But now, they don't even have time to run to where Wizard Holt is, before they are overtaken and torn apart by the giant wolf. How stupid. Ouch! The howl of the wolf sounded again, and the footsteps of the giant wolf chasing behind him suddenly decreased. Apparently one went after the city guards on the other side. The guard captain was breathing heavily and had no time to think anymore. The giant wolf behind him was getting closer and closer, and now he seemed to be able to feel the fishy smell coming from its mouth. Ah! But at this moment, the young city guard beside him screamed in pain and fell heavily to the ground. It seemed that his feet were sprained. He subconsciously pulled it, but he misjudged the force with which the young city guard fell. In an instant, he was pulled away from his center of gravity and fell to the ground together with the young city guard. "It's over." He fell to the ground, feeling the approaching breath of the giant wolf behind him, and felt strong fear in his heart. The city guard on the side accidentally fell on his head and is now unconscious. Laugh! But at this moment, a slight sound broke through the air. Boom! Then he felt the ground shake, as if something heavy had fallen to the ground. Then a pair of booted feet appeared in front of him. The captain of the city guard raised his head and was slightly startled. He didn't expect that what was waiting for him after he fell to the ground was not the terrifying wolf kiss, but Colin's figure. He turned his head subconsciously and then jerked back. A giant gray wolf was lying less than half a meter behind him, its head with its big mouth pointed at him. If it weren't for the hole that penetrated its skull, it would have looked like it was still alive. So, he was caught off guard and taken aback. After Colin saw that the guard captain didn't seem to be in trouble, he stopped staying and continued to chase the other giant wolves. However, he didn't know why some city guards ran away. Could it be that they were panicking and choosing their own way? He couldn't help but sigh. At the current speed, it would be difficult for him to save them. At this time, the captain of the city guard finally came to his senses. He watched Colin gradually leave, his pupils slightly dilated, and his heart was full of shock. After a while, he slowly stood up. Under the night, on the endless dark field, a ball of fire gathered. Where the firelight gathered, Holt and Colin were standing side by side. In front of them was a huge white wolf. The white wolf fell to the ground dead. The fatal injury seemed to be a huge penetrating wound on its head. Several city guards were cutting up the wolf carcasses. There are more and more types of ferocious beasts, and they are getting stronger and stronger. These giant wolves have never appeared before. Holt suddenly sighed. Originally, he had no intention of coming after seeing the flare. But then several wolf howls were heard one after another, and it sounded like there were quite a lot of ferocious beasts attacking. Although he is not worried about Colin's safety. After all, Colin's defensive witchcraft strength is already the best among intermediate apprentices. But after all, Colin was only an intermediate apprentice. After thinking for a while, he was ready to come over and help. But he didn't expect that by the time he arrived, the battle had already ended. From this point of view, in addition to defense, Colin's attack is also not bad. When Colin heard this, he nodded silently. He didn't feel much about it. After all, this was his first month on duty. In his opinion, the giant wolf that was attacking tonight was not as powerful as the black-maned giant pig before. If they were one-on-one, they can hunt the black-maned giant boar, just because the black-maned giant boar is not very powerful in attacking, and they are more powerful in numbers than wolves. I didn't expect that the outer edge of the dark forest close to this area had just been cleaned up, and another vicious beast would attack so soon. Holt continued to sigh. But I think those giant wolves came after the giant black-maned pig. Maybe this is just a coincidence? Colin was confused. It's a coincidence, but it's not. Holt smiled and explained. The giant black-maned pig was undoubtedly the overlord of this area before. In other words, the outer edge of the dark forest near this area was their territory. Now that we have basically slaughtered them all, the vacancies in the original territory will naturally be filled by other ferocious beasts. Colin nodded, and that was indeed the truth. Boom! At this time, a signal flare suddenly exploded in the sky in the distance. Colin looked from a distance and saw the light of fire swaying in the darkness in the distance. It was probably that a vicious beast was coming. The ferocious beasts are indeed attacking more frequently than before. He couldn't help but sigh, then withdrew his gaze and looked back at the wolf corpse. At this time, the white wolf's wolf skin had been completely peeled off by the city guards, revealing the bright red muscles underneath that were no different from ordinary beasts. Colin had some inexplicable doubts in his heart. What are these ferocious beasts? The black-maned giant boar last time was okay. At least it could show some extraordinary bloodline. But these giant wolves, except for this white wolf, are just enlarged versions of ordinary wild wolves. He has no magic power, and his bloodline is ordinary, but his strength is not weak. He looked up at the dark forest hidden in the darkness in the distance. The secret behind this may only be known when he becomes a formal wizard and goes to explore the forest. Holt followed Colin's gaze and seemed to think he was worried, so he took the initiative to comfort him. You don't have to worry too much. The increase in vicious beast attacks is only temporary, because Wizard Lap already knows. When he said this, his tone changed and his words were full of confidence, as if as long as the Lap wizard knew about this, everything would be solved. Colin nodded non-committally, and from the corner of his eye, he saw a bit of fire moving past. He looked over. There, the guard captain and the young city guard with gauze on his head were carrying a stretcher and walking away. The fire came from the torches tied to both sides of the stretcher. Okay, I'll go back. You can continue on duty. Holt said again. Okay. Colin also withdrew his gaze and said goodbye to Holt. He watched Holt soar into the sky, and after his figure gradually disappeared into the darkness, he also stepped back to the cabin on duty. and on the other side, the young city guards were carrying the stretcher and shedding tears silently. As a new member of the city guard, this was the first time he encountered such a thing. "Oh, don't cry." The guard captain turned around and comforted. "I'm not crying." The young man subconsciously raised his left hand to wipe away his tears. But the stretcher in front of him instantly tilted because he lost the support of his left hand and almost dropped the body on it. Fortunately, he reacted in the next second and stabilized the stretcher again. "You!" The guard captain subconsciously turned around and wanted to curse, but looking at the young city guard, he finally just sighed. After all, their team of city guards only has 2.5 people left. He, the young man, and a cripple who lost his legs. After a while, the guard captain spoke again. "You have just arrived and are not used to it yet. It will be fine when you get used to it. People like us work with a knife on our neck. Death is a common occurrence." But at this point, the guard captain's tone suddenly changed. "You kid must remember the lesson from this time, clearly. Don't be as stupid as Jack and the others. A tailor's foolishness may result in the loss of just a piece of fabric. But when we are stupid once, what we lose is life." In the cabin on duty, under the illumination of the bright crystal, Colin spread out a piece of white paper on the wooden table. After previous actual combat tests in the dark forest, he discovered some problems with the spear. Although the spear dart is very useful when facing most small targets, one hit can create a big hole. But when facing large creatures like the black-maned giant boar king, it is somewhat powerless. Therefore, he planned to design a new kind of spear specifically designed to attack large creatures. Just like that, time passed quietly. The rest of the night was calm. It's just that the footsteps of the patrolling city guards have become much less frequent. As sunrise approaches, the sea level lights up slightly in the distance to the east. "Call." Colin let out a breath, stretched, and looked at his pocket watch. Today's shift is over again. He arranged the manuscript papers on the table and put them away with him. Then he picked up the white wolf meat sent by the guards from the nearby city and turned around and walked out of the wooden house on duty. "Ah!" As soon as Colin opened the door, he saw a flaming stream of light coming from the horizon with a suffocating momentum. Lap Wizard. Without any explanation, Colin already knew Yingguang's identity. There could be no one else with such momentum. It must be the Lap Wizard. The flaming stream of light only stayed in his sight for a moment. In the blink of an eye, it crossed the sky and plunged straight into the dark forest. At this time, Colin inexplicably recalled what Holt said with confidence last night. Wizard Lap already knows. Could it be that Wizard Lap personally came to clean up the ferocious beasts? He watched the Lap Wizard enter the dark forest as if entering an uninhabited land, and he couldn't help but feel filled with emotion. Return home. After eating and waking up, I started practicing as usual. He had already given the new spear dart drawings to Arthur in the morning to find someone to customize them. Completed a set of solar breathing techniques. Colin exhaled a breath of turbid air, feeling the strength in his body increasing again, and he felt happy. He focused on his chest. The energy in the heart is a little less than before. Solar breathing seems to promote its absorption. According to the current speed, he should be able to absorb the energy in the heart before long. After practicing solar breathing, he started practicing witchcraft again. The main practice is Hope's defensive force field. Looking back on this narrow escape, the biggest contributor is obviously his strong defense. And Hope's defensive force field is only halfway progress, and it can't even be used instantly. It clearly needs to be improved as soon as possible. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and the tides rise and fall on the seashore. In the blink of an eye, another half-month passed. Tap, tap, tap. Call. In front of the west gate of Black Rock City, the black carriage gradually stopped. Colin stepped out of the black curved carriage and walked out of the city gate in a familiar manner. He was wearing a dark black witch robe with a silver triangle badge on his chest. He was also carrying a white wolfskin satchel in his hand, which contained manuscript papers, bright crystals, and other miscellaneous items. From a distance, soldiers wearing steel armor at the city gate greeted him respectfully. In the past month, they have become very familiar with this new wizard. Entering the duty cabin, Colin put down his satchel, moved his body a little, and then began to continue practicing. In a few days, he will end his shift for this month. Since the last visit of Wizard Lab, the number of ferocious beasts attacking in the dark forest has been decreasing day by day. His strength has also gradually weakened, from being comparable to an intermediate wizard apprentice at the beginning to now being at most a level similar to an ordinary junior wizard apprentice. On several occasions, the captain of the city guard, who was a great knight, led the knights to deal with the situation directly. No need for him to take action. And now, there haven't even been any vicious beast attacks in the past few days. However, I don't know if it is because of this reason that their team has not added new wizards on duty. In this area on the far right in the west of the city, he and Holt are still the only two people on duty. On the other hand, the Chiwen gang on the side had already filled up their manpower on duty. Moreover, most of the time recently, he was the only one in this entire area. Holt didn't know what he was busy with, and he often didn't see anyone. After practicing Hope's defensive force field several times, with a thought in his mind, Colin summoned the gold paper. Pale golden particles gathered. Name, Colin Leonard. Level, Intermediate Wizard Apprentice, 4 out of 100. Grand Knight, 45 out of 100. Meditation Method, Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I, 40/100. Solar Breathing Method I, 95/100. Witchcraft, 0 level magic, slightly, 0 level wizardry. Steel Armor I, 17 out of 100. Arrow I, 19 out of 100. Secondary High Temperature Tolerance, 58 out of 100. Hope's Defense Field, 70 out of 100. Fireball, 64 out of 100. Detect Evil, 46 out of 100. Purify Evil Energy, 41 out of 100. Skill, Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production. Talent, Intermediate Strong Life, 95 out of 100. Break Limit Point, 0. His eyes slowly moved across the gold paper, and the 4 colors of blue, gold, purple, and black came into view. Based on previous attempts, he has learned that gold means reaching the limit, blue means breaking the limit, and black means the initial state of the skill. But now there's a new color, purple. This purple color is the color surrounding the middle-level talent with strong life. Perhaps this represents the level equivalent to breaking the limit twice. He couldn't help but speculate in his mind. Every time he practices steel armor, a witchcraft that breaks the limit once, the symbol flashing behind it is always the same purple. From this point of view, the display of the intermediate talent and strong life on the gold paper seems to be slightly different from that of witchcraft. This may be because the starting points between the two are different. After all, talent is not like witchcraft. It is practiced from scratch. It is already an intermediate level of power from the moment it is obtained. In addition, the golden 4-leaf clover energy had been completely digested by him 5 days ago. His soul strength has been greatly improved, and the progress of the intermediate life-strengthening talent has finally been fixed at 95 to 100. Although he did not reach a high level in one fell swoop, his self-healing ability has been greatly improved compared to before. For the same wound, the time it takes to heal is only half of what it was before. The only thing that worried him a little was, after the energy in the heart disappears, although the flashing symbol will still appear behind the intermediate level of strength every time you practice solar breathing, the improvement speed becomes very slow. It has been 5 days since the energy was completely digested, and it has not improved at all. However, in addition, he has successfully practiced Hope's defensive force field and fireball skills to the point where they can be used instantly, and the secondary high temperature tolerance is only 2 points short of being able to be used instantly. Other witchcraft also have different improvements. It can be considered that time was not wasted. Unfortunately, there is still not enough time. He sighed softly and closed the gold paper. Although with the help of Renee and Arthur, he now does not need to deal with any chores every day, and all his time is spent on training. But he still felt there wasn't enough time. The number of magic stones on his body now totals 109 as a result of the reward from the black-maned giant boar incident and the corpse of the ferocious beast. 109 magic stones are equivalent to 109 limit-breaking points. With so many limit-breaking points in hand, he has long been eager to improve himself. Unfortunately, None of the items on the golden paper has reached the limit yet, but it's soon. The progress of the solar breathing technique, which has broken the limit at least once, has reached 95 out of 100 and is only 5 points away from being able to improve again. Tuck, tuck, tuck. At this time, a knock on the door suddenly sounded. Colin. Holt's voice came from outside. Colin stood up and opened the door in confusion. "Good evening, Captain," he greeted Holt. "Good evening, Colin." Holt's expression was a little complicated, looking forward to yet melancholy. He looked at Colin and said, "I have something to tell you." Colin nodded and stared at him. "There may not be any more people from our team." Holt sighed. Colin frowned slightly, looking puzzled. "Isn't anyone coming? Could it be that he and Holt will be the only ones on duty in the future? Or the team has been disbanded?" Holt sighed and added, "I'm going back to the wizarding territory for a while. Minister Barton just informed me today." He paused and then continued. "This should be the punishment for the previous Dark Forest incident. In addition, you have also discovered that there are fewer and fewer ferocious beast attacks in the west of the city. This means that the west of the city may not need so many wizards on duty for the time being. And when I leave, you will be the only one left in the team, so the team is equivalent to being disbanded. And you should be reassigned to other teams or to other guards in the city." Colin was silent, digesting the sudden news. "I didn't expect that I would be transferred again less than a month after I came to Qingxi to work. By the way, do you remember Catherine from before?" Holt paused and asked suddenly. "Remember?" Colin nodded. "She was indeed contaminated by the evil god. The degree of contamination was very high. I heard that in the end, the corpse was handled by the Lap wizard himself. Moreover, there seems to be a shadow of a cultist behind this." Holt hesitated and then said, "There is a high probability that you will be assigned back to the headquarters to be responsible for the security of the city. Although your strength is not bad, most of those cultists and polluters are weird and difficult to deal with. When you have time, you should practice more witchcraft of detecting evil and purifying evil energy." Perhaps because he was about to return to the wizarding territory and would not be able to go down the mountain for a while, Holt felt melancholy and talked a lot before saying goodbye to Colin. Colin stood at the door and said goodbye to Holt, watching him go away. Holt is gentle and friendly and has no airs. Although he sometimes has some flaws, he is undoubtedly a good captain overall. This time he returned to the wizarding territory, and he didn't know when he would have a chance to meet again. He closed the door, turned around, and looked at the bright moon outside the window, not only lamenting the impermanence of the world. The next day, after finishing his shift, Colin went straight to the guard station in the west of the city. Before leaving last night, Holt told him that he would need to go to Secretary Patton to get the specific transfer order tomorrow morning. "Tuck, tuck, tuck. Please come in." He walked into Secretary Patton's office. Surprisingly, there was another person inside. "Sir Berkeley, Secretary Patton." He greeted respectfully. "You came just in time. We were just chatting about you." Berkeley looked back at Colin and said with a smile, "You have been transferred back to the headquarters, Colin." Barton next to him also took out a transfer order in time and handed it to Colin, patted him on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "Holt recommended you to me, saying that your strength is not bad. When you go to the headquarters, don't embarrass our city west." Colin took the order with a smile and lowered his head to check. No wonder Holt told himself last night that he would most likely be transferred to the headquarters. It turned out to be his recommendation. The transfer order states the date and address of the report. The date is the day after tomorrow, and the address, 28 Acorn Street. "Minister, is this address written wrong?" He couldn't help but raise his head and asked. Number 28 Acorn Street is in the west of the city, even closer to his home than the city West Guard office here. "It's not wrong," Berkeley explained. "Last week, at the suggestion of Lord Price, Wizard Lap ordered the Guard Department to reorganize a new parallel department, the Inspection Department. The original Guard Office headquarters has now been transformed into the Inspection Office headquarters. The Guard offices in the west and east of the city have been slightly reduced and are specifically responsible for dealing with ferocious beasts and strange things on the beach. The new Inspection Office has also set up 3 offices in the east, west, and middle of the city. The one you want to go to is the Inspection Office in the west of the city. However, both the inspection offices in the east and west of the city are now managed by the inspection office headquarters in the city, so you have been transferred back to the headquarters in name. That's it, I understand. Thank you. Colin nodded. Unexpectedly, so many things happened quietly while he was on duty. Have they actually established a new department? He was not surprised that Price was able to convince the lab wizard to change the structure of the guard. After all, the guard is essentially a boost provided to Price by the lab wizard. In fact, in Black Rock City, although in name it is the Berkeley Commanding Guard Office. But in fact, daily management orders are usually issued by Price, and Berkeley is mainly responsible for the patrols in the wizarding territory. Well, if nothing happens, just go home and rest. Remember to report back the day after tomorrow. Okay. Colin left the guard's office, got on the carriage, and headed back home. He thought as he ate the breakfast Renee brought. The establishment of the inspection office is obviously to increase the power of the city. Perhaps this is related to Catherine's contamination? He thought about it in his mind, but couldn't come up with a result. There's still too few clues. But there must be something going on behind the scenes that he doesn't know about. It's still too weak. Colin took the handkerchief Renee handed him and wiped his mouth. Even now, compared to before, his strength is incomparable. But in this world, you can still just go with the flow and obey the arrangements of your superiors. He had just finally adapted to the life of being on duty in the west of the city. He was seeing fewer and fewer ferocious beast attacks, and the night watch was getting easier and easier. But now he had to be transferred to a new position. The only good thing is that I can still stay in the west of the city. At least this way, he doesn't have to think about changing his house. Palm Street. Home basement. Colin held 2 palm-long narrow-pointed darts and looked at them carefully. These cone-shaped darts are somewhat similar in appearance to the bullets of previous generations, so they may be called cone bullets. This is his newly customized ammunition for arrow shooting, specially used to kill large creatures. After actual combat, he carefully reviewed the shortcomings exposed by the original fusiform darts. The fusiform dart is like the armor-piercing bullet of the rifle in the previous life, with strong penetrating power. But many times it is precisely because of this strong penetrating power that the kinetic energy does not fully act on the target, and the final damage is unsatisfactory. As for the 2 newly customized large cone bombs, one of them has a pointed cone at the front that is made of copper and is hollow inside. After this kind of cavity cone projectile hits the target, the tip will deform, causing the center of gravity to shift. The cone projectile will become unstable and roll inside the target, fully exerting its kinetic energy to cause maximum damage. Another type of solid cone bullet is used for armor breaking. Based on the same principle, Colin also made a batch of the same knuckle-sized cavity cone bullets and a batch of solid cone bullets to enrich his ammunition. The original spear dart was eliminated by him. In this way, when facing different targets, he can choose different cone bombs accordingly. Asterisk, 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 28, Acorn Street. This should be it. Colin raised his head and looked at the gray building in front of him, and then stepped inside. 2 days passed quietly, and today was the day for him to come to inspect the office. Opening the door, you are greeted by a simply decorated hall. A fat man is sitting in the chair on the left front. He was dozing with a plate of greasy, crispy pork belly. "Hello? I'm new here to report," Colin asked the fat man while taking out his transfer order. Flowers slowly opened his eyes, glanced at Colin, took the paper order from him with his greasy hands, and put it aside. "Well, I understand. As you can see, I am your Captain Flower." He then took a piece of pork belly and put it into his mouth, chewing it while closing his eyes again. "Okay, don't bother me here. For other matters, go to the deputy captain in the innermost room and let him talk to you." Colin looked calm and didn't care. He nodded and followed Flower's instructions and walked towards the innermost room. An attitude like Flower's is the common attitude of superiors towards inferiors in this world. People like Holt are only a minority. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Colin knocked on the innermost door. "Please come in." A slightly shrill voice came from inside. He pushed the door open and saw a young man with a mustache, slightly sunken cheeks, and a pale complexion. He wears a silver badge on his chest. He should be an intermediate apprentice like him. "You must be Colin." Before he could introduce himself, the young man took the initiative and said with a smile, "My name is Barney. and I'm your vice captain. Vice Captain Barney. When Barney heard this, the smile on his face became even bigger. Welcome to the inspection office. We are short of manpower here. I heard that you are very powerful. There is just one thing you need to do. 2 hours later, Barney took Colin outside the last pub. This is the last place. Captain Flower likes the grilled fish here the most. Do you remember it? Remember? Do you remember all the restaurants and bars I took you to before? Colin nodded silently. He didn't remember it deliberately, but after being strengthened by the golden four-leaf clover, his memory was greatly enhanced. Barney would never forget it as long as he said it once. Very good. What you have to do is very simple. That is, buy different food and deliver it at different times every day. Barney nodded with satisfaction, and then emphasized, remember, deliver it to me through the side door first. In fact, such chores don't require a wizard like Colin to do it. He just wanted to make Colin understand his identity as vice captain and understand the meaning of dignity and inferiority. Barney, is this the daily work of the inspection office? He was really speechless and asked with a frown. Vice Captain Barney. Barney frowned and interrupted him. After a pause, he pretended to be serious and earnestly admonished. You are still young. You don't understand. There is no danger in the city. I have worked at the headquarters for several years and have encountered less than 10 incidents. There is no need to patrol according to regulations. You have to know that our Captain Flower is the #1 disciple among the top apprentices. As long as you please him, you can do whatever you want. Colin became increasingly impatient and took the initiative to block Barney's words, not knowing what to say. Roll! Flower slapped the crispy roast chicken in front of him aside with a big hand. In the simply decorated inspection office hall, Barney stood there, watching Flower's huge body disappear at the end of the hall, with a look of pure astonishment on his face. It was already the second day that Colin came to the inspection office. Today he came a little late on purpose. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Barney fawningly walking towards Flower with a plate of roast chicken. It seemed like what he thought. Barney couldn't wait for him, so he had to go and give it to Flower first. I bought food, but Colin didn't expect that things would develop like this. Barney stood there blankly holding an empty plate, and with the roast chicken falling on the ground and his dazed and stunned expression, he looked a little desolate. Oh, what an idiot. At this time, a female voice suddenly came from the right side. The voice was melodious, and it made Colin feel familiar for some reason. Barney, who was not far away, heard the words. His face turned green and red, and finally reacted. He turned his head and asked sharply, Regina, what do you mean? Colin followed his gaze to the right. Behind the red wooden table next to the glazed window, a young woman of about 18 or 19 years old was sitting on a chair, flipping through a thick book. She doesn't look outstanding, just average, but she has a quiet temperament. Although she looks only 18 or 19 years old, she feels like an older sister. A pure black cat lying lazily in her arms added a bit of mystery to her. Regina continued to flip through the books in her hands, without raising her head, and just said lightly, Next time you want to please others, remember to ask for clear information first. Who among the wizards leading the patrol doesn't know that Mr. Flower is a glutton for 1 week and anorexic for another? Yes, I almost forgot that you are not from the patrol team. You are just a person assigned to the guard team with poor talent. She raised her head slightly and stared at Barney. Idiot. Barney was suffocated when he heard the words and finally understood. His face looked ugly. But he doesn't think it's his problem. The patrol office had just been established. Not only were there members of the original guard team, but some members of the wizard-led patrol team were also recruited. He comes from the guard team in Blackstone City, and Flower comes from the patrol team in the wizarding realm on the mountain. It's normal to have things that you don't understand, but Regina clearly knows. A burst of shame and anger suddenly surged in his heart. His face twisted, and he cursed. You already knew this. Why didn't you remind me? I'm your vice captain. Oh, the vice captain who came here just to beg for mercy? Regina sighed, feeling a little speechless. She put down the book, slowly raised her head, looked at Barney, and said word by word, Your Excellency Flower is just too lazy to take care of chores. You, the deputy captain, are just a servant who handles chores. After saying this, Her tone changed and became cold. Also, where did you get the courage to talk to me like this? Do you want to do what you did last time, relying on your status as deputy captain to order me to do things? Is it possible that the lesson learned last time was not enough? As she uttered every word, the black cat that was originally lying on her lap suddenly opened its green eyes and jumped onto the carpet. It gracefully stepped forward step by step on the floor. Its body swelled in the wind, and in an instant it transformed from a black cat as short as a forearm to a ferocious leopard-shaped beast with sharp teeth and 2 meters tall. Roar! A low roar came from its throat and echoed throughout the hall. You! Barney's face turned pale at first, then turned red instantly, and he gasped violently, but in the end he didn't say anything and just turned around and left here silently. Wizards have always been respected for their strength. He had already experienced Regina's power last time, so naturally he didn't want to ask for trouble again. Barney lowered his head and passed by Colin and walked out of the patrol office. Colin withdrew his gaze and prepared to find a place to sit and rest. He also saw clearly that Barney was just a clown who thought he was in Flower's lap. But in fact, neither Flower nor anyone else took him seriously. The so-called deputy captain is not a position established by the inspection office at all. It is most likely just a casual mention by Flower. There is no power to order them. Have I seen you somewhere? Just as he was about to take a step forward to sit at the table by the window on the left, Regina suddenly stopped him. Colin turned around, and the black cat gradually returned to its original size, jumped back into Regina's lap, and curled up into a ball. If this wasn't a different world, he would have regarded this sentence as a cliched pickup line. But he didn't now. He looked at Regina and frowned slightly. He also felt that Regina in front of him was somewhat familiar. Are you Colin? Regina looked at him for a while and then asked uncertainly. At this time, Colin finally thought of Regina in the memory corner of his mind. Regina was an apprentice at the same time as him, but she was much more talented than him. She had successfully advanced to an intermediate apprenticeship in the 4th year. He hadn't seen her in almost 6 years. We haven't seen each other for 6 years, so my impression has long been blurred. No wonder I can't remember it for a while. I didn't expect you to advance as well. Congratulations, Regina said calmly. Remembering who Colin was and solving her doubts, she also lost interest in Colin. Thank you, I just advanced not long ago. Colin nodded politely and sat on the chair by the window on the left. The patrol team's daily work mainly involves taking turns to work here for 2 days every week, and then patrolling once at night. Now it seems that Regina should be working on the same day as him. Unless the subordinate guards come to report when you are on duty, nothing will happen. The hall fell silent for a moment. There was only the sound of 2 people rustling and turning the pages of books. After another moment, Regina suddenly asked, "Did Barney use his status as deputy captain to instruct you to do things?" Have. Colin hesitated to answer, feeling a little confused. Barney is just a stupid villain. There is no need to pay attention to him. Regina laughed and then changed her tone. However, wizards respect strength. If you can't beat him, then you can only be honest. Follow orders. Colin frowned silently and did not answer. Regina glanced at him and added, I mean, I can help you. Of course, it's not for free. I just need some compensation. The reward is not much, just 5 magic stones. Regina put down the book, stroked the smooth fur of the black cat in her arms, and looked at Colin calmly. She was worried about earning enough magic stones every month to feed these little cuties. So much so that she was unwilling to give up any opportunity to earn magic stones. I see. Colin finally understood the reason why Regina spoke. He paused and replied gently and politely. Thank you. I will come to you if I need anything. Well, you're always welcome. Regina nodded gently. Although Colin did not agree directly, it was somewhat beyond her expectation. But she just asked casually, it would be great if she could do this business, and it didn't matter if she couldn't. Regina lowered her head and continued reading. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Guards carrying lanterns patrolled the empty streets after curfew. Colin stood on the watchtower, which was significantly higher than the nearby buildings, watching them slowly pass underneath, disappear, and finally turned into short lines of light. Watchtowers like this are spread out in a network across Blackstone City, with one every few blocks. He stood here with a panoramic view of everything around him. The constant low-light visual aid of the witch formation on the watchtower also made him not afraid of the dark night and could clearly distinguish all the changes around him. It was now his 5th day in the patrol team, and according to the schedule, it was his turn to be on night duty. These days, in order to better cope with these strange things, he has suspended other witchcraft practices. In addition to practicing solar breathing every day, he also practices the 2 witchcrafts of detecting evil and purifying evil energy. I also successfully practiced detecting evil to 64/100 and purifying evil energy to 61/100, both of which have reached the point where they can be cast instantly. The solar breathing method, I also reached 99 out of 100, just shy of breaking the limit again. Colin looked around silently. All was calm and serene. No wonder Barney cares so little about his day job. He thought silently. Since Wizard Lap came to this island and set up a guard team, the number of weird and evil spirits in Black Rock City has been decreasing day by day. Now it is rare to hear of evil spirits causing heavy casualties. But he felt vaguely uneasy. He didn't think it was useless for Wizard Lap and Priest to separate the patrol team from the guard team. Compared to him, the Lap Wizard undoubtedly has more information. The decisions they make will never be without purpose. What's more, Flower also specifically reminded them of the importance of being on duty 2 days ago. He must not take it lightly. The next day, in the evening, in the basement, Colin was shirtless, stood quietly after finishing his exercises, and exhaled a long breath. To be honest, the work of the patrol team is still easier than the original night watch in the west of the city. According to the duty schedule, he is on duty on Mondays and Tuesdays every week, and on Fridays he is on night duty. This means that after finishing his night shift last night, he will not have another job until Monday, the day after tomorrow. He silently called out the gold paper. The solar breathing method that once broke the limit was finally pushed to the limit again today. But the symbol behind it, now because there aren't enough breaking points, is just a dull black with no outline light. Without any hesitation, Colin took out the magic stones, concentrated his thoughts, and began to transform them into limit-breaking points. The black characters at the bottom of the gold paper kept beating. 0, 1, 2, 5, 10. Colin paused for a moment and looked at the solar breathing method again. The behind it is still black and has no change. This means that the limit breaking point is insufficient. Colin frowned. According to his previous experience in improving the ignition technique, it should be increased tenfold. But he then thought about it. The ignition technique and the solar breathing technique that broke the limit at one time were obviously completely different. How could the limit breaking points required to reach the limit increase according to the same law? From this point of view, different witchcraft, meditation methods, breathing methods, and even talents should have different multipliers to increase the limit breaking points each time they reach the limit. He continues to absorb magic stones. 10, 11, 12. It was not until 50 o'clock, when nearly half of the magic stones in the wallet were consumed, that the symbol behind solar breathing method I gradually began to glow with a purple outline. Colin exhaled softly, put down the money bag, and then did not hesitate. Concentrate your mind and go behind the sunlight breathing method. Boom! The heart rate suddenly increased, and the blood circulated rapidly. Sweat gradually emerges from the forehead, tip of the nose, back, neck, etc., and gradually evaporates into heat. After an unknown amount of time, Colin finally opened his eyes and let out a long breath. He looked at the gold paper. Solar breathing I, 100, has been changed to solar breathing 2, 0/100. He closed his eyes again and tried to figure out the limit-breaking sunlight breathing method. According to ordinary concepts, the great night is the end of the knighthood. But the new solar breathing method goes a step further on this basis, using the blood energy of the great night to further develop the body. According to the new solar breathing method after the great night, there is a new breakthrough. It may be called the ultimate great night. At this level, the physical quality is only slightly higher than that of the great night, and the gap cannot be widened. But in terms of speed, especially reaction speed. It optimizes nerves through blood gas and greatly enhances the transmission speed of nerve signals. In layman's terms, it reduces the body's latency. The lower the latency, the more variation in responses can be made in the same amount of time. This improvement seems to only increase the reaction time by tens of milliseconds. But in actual combat situations, if you can be faster than the enemy by tens of milliseconds, it may be the difference between life and death. This is undoubtedly a big improvement. It's a pity that it failed to break through the boundaries of the Great Night. I don't know if the solar breathing method can continue to improve, Colin thought inexplicably. He stood up and slowly started the second limit-breaking solar breathing technique. After a while, he stopped and stood quietly, looking at the gold paper. As usual, a flashing symbol appeared behind solar breathing 2. Colin carefully observed the outline of a circle of light outside the symbol. Not gold, but red. It seems that it can continue to improve. Colin understood. As long as it is not golden, it means that it has not reached its true limit and can continue to improve. After dinner, Colin came to the meditation room and started meditating as usual. As for Barney's words, he didn't take them to heart at all and had long been thrown aside. He lit the Ningxian incense, sat on the soft cushions in the meditation room, and began to meditate. Since absorbing the golden four-leaf clover, he obviously felt that his magic power increased faster during meditation than before. His qualifications have obviously improved a lot. Probably, he has reached the second level. The manifestation of these changes on the gold paper is that the progress of the intermediate wizard apprentice level has increased faster. In the past, it would take about 20 days to make a little progress, but now it should only take about 10 days. As night falls, Colin ends his meditation. He could indeed feel that his qualifications had improved, but he could only estimate it vaguely and not accurately. Thinking of this, he had an idea. Perhaps I should buy a talent crystal ball and test my improved specific talents for myself. Just do it. Early the next morning, he drove straight to the center of the city in a carriage. There are only two places on the island where there are gifted crystal balls. One is the shop outside the wizard's territory on the mountain, and the other is Wizard Alley in the center of Black Rock City. If he went to the mountain road was steep and difficult for ordinary carriages to pass, so he could only walk. If he set out from outside the city gate, it would take him more than an hour to reach the wizard's shop, and it would take even longer to set off from his home on Palm Street. However, if you choose to go to the city center, although it will take more than an hour, you don't need to walk. You can go directly by horse-drawn carriage. Comparing the two, it's clear which one to choose. Sitting in the carriage, Colin lifted the curtains of the carriage window and looked outside casually. Outsiders in carriages came and went, most of them wearing linen clothes and with thin bodies. Not long after, the carriage came to a long, gentle slope of yellow mud. On both sides of it, there are many vendors carrying sea fish or other sundries hawking. There are obviously more people here than other places. The speed of the carriage also slowed down. And when there are more people, the smell becomes messy, especially on this island with limited sanitary conditions. Suddenly, the smell of sweat, fish, feet, and even the subtle smell of feces and urine all poured in from the window. Colin frowned slightly and put down the curtain. "Master, we're here," Arthur said respectfully. The black carriage gradually stopped. Colin opened the door and walked out slowly. What comes into view is a narrow brick street with various shops on both sides. The environment here is finally better. The sanitary conditions in Black Rock City are really unflattering. Only wealthy areas like his residence and the city center here are slightly better. Walking into the alley, Colin felt like he was back in the wizard's territory in a daze. Most of the pedestrians coming and going here are wizards, and ordinary people are extinct here. Speaking of which, I also bought the night combat skills and bee needles here last time. It's a pity that the plan couldn't keep up with the changes, and he hasn't practiced the Kangguang once yet. After all, his energy is really limited, and he still hasn't practiced the skills on the gold paper to the limit. How can he still have time to practice ordinary night combat skills? While thinking about it, he walked into a grocery store. Not long after, he came out with a gifted crystal ball the size of 2 fists. This crystal ball was not cheap, costing him 5 magic stones. Rushing home quickly, he couldn't wait to get to the basement. Concentrate and place your hand on the clear crystal ball. After a while, white mist slowly rose from the crystal ball. Colin carefully observed the size of the fog. Probably 7 out of 10. A glimmer of understanding flashed in his eyes. 7 out of 10 was already the highest level of second level, and anything above was first level. Although I had already expected it, I still felt a little excited when I actually learned the specific results. In addition to qualifications, at least half of a wizard's talent is the ability to learn knowledge. But after all, qualifications also account for half. After all, the original owner's talent was only 4th level before. Even if the golden paper improved his talent in disguise, his real talent was always only 4th level. Now it has been directly upgraded to 2nd level, which can be regarded as making up for one shortcoming. Play. Time flies by like this. What surprised Colin was that he clearly did not go on duty for Barney that night. But Barney did not come to trouble him again after that. Perhaps he thought he had gone? He speculated secretly. Just like that, a week passed and Sunday came again. This morning, the sky was dim. Acorn Street. Passers-by are sparsely populated. Drive. On the yellow mud road, a carriage came galloping from a distance. A guard knight, wearing leather armor, was following beside him on a black horse. In the carriage, Colin frowned slightly. Today was supposed to be his day of rest, but Flower sent a guard to deliver a message for some reason, asking them to gather at the inspection office immediately. After getting the news, Colin asked Arthur to drive towards the inspection office and was on the way now. Tap, tap, tap. Horse hooves stepped on the yellow mud ground, raising fine dust and blending into the early morning mist. Not long after, he arrived at the inspection office. After getting off the carriage and coming to the door, he gently pushed the hall door open and walked in. At this time, Flower was sitting on a lounge chair in the middle of the hall, eating crispy roast chicken. Some people have gathered in front of him, but judging from the number of people, there should be some who have not yet arrived. Colin stepped forward, walked into the crowd, and waited quietly. Click, click. Time passed slowly with the sound of Flower chewing chicken bones. After a while, there were more people, but it seemed that they were not all there yet. Flower still didn't speak, just focused on eating the roast chicken. Colin scanned the area carefully and counted the number of people secretly. Only one person hasn't arrived yet, it seems. Barney? It was at this time that the door to the hall was pushed open again. Barney walked in a hurry. His clothes were a little disheveled, and his forehead was a little sweaty from the rush. She must have just gotten up from the woman's bed. Colin looked around at Barney calmly, and from a distance, he could smell Barney's perfume. Barney came to stand on the far left and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Flower raised his head and glanced at Barney, swallowed the last bite of food in his mouth, and slowly said, "Since everyone is here, I will keep the story short." "Barney," he said coldly. "I'm here, Lord Flower." Barney was startled and responded quickly. "Come here." Flower stood up slowly and smiled inexplicably at Barney. Barney walked out of the queue obediently, with some confusion on his face. He looked at Flower's smile, and his heart skipped a beat. Some nervousness, but also some anticipation. Could it be? Although he knew it was impossible, this impossible idea suddenly appeared in his mind for some reason. Could it be that Mr. Flower saw my hard work over the past few days and planned to announce my status as vice captain in front of everyone? This idea became uncontrollable as soon as it arose. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his idea seemed not so impossible. Furthermore, every subtle movement of Flower, even the oil on his hands, is supporting his inference. Although I thought a lot, in reality, only a moment passed. Feeling the gaze coming from behind, Barney couldn't help but straighten his back, feeling proud in his heart. After adjusting his expression, he turned back indifferently, his eyes swept from left to right, and finally stayed on Regina for a moment, then put on an attentive expression and walked to Flower's side. When Barney walked up to him, Flower's smile suddenly disappeared. He raised his hand and put it on Barney's shoulder. Barney felt an incomparable force coming from his shoulders, and he fell to his knees heavily without warning. Boom! Ah! His knees made a dull sound as they collided with the hard wooden floor. He felt as if his knees had been shattered. I couldn't help but let out a cry of pain. He raised his head and looked up at Flower in surprise, as if asking why. The apprentices who were watching around also felt their hearts skip a beat, but they all smiled after reacting. Regina is the one who gloats the most. Barney is a complete villain. His popularity cannot be said to be bad. It can only be said that he is not popular at all. Flower turned around and sat back on the recliner. He looked at Barney and slowly asked, "Where were you last night?" "I was on duty." Barney subconsciously wanted to answer that he was on duty last night. But he quickly realized that since Flower would ask this, he must know that he was not on duty last night. "Why didn't you go on night watch?" Flower continued to ask. "I didn't go on night watch. Didn't Colin go on night watch in my place?" Barney's eyes flashed with confusion. Flower didn't wait for his response and continued to talk to himself. "Last night, at number 79 Tulip Street, a woman and 12 of her maids were brutally killed, and their hearts were taken out. It wasn't until early in the morning that the guards noticed something strange." Flower paused for a moment and then asked, "Barney, you know what? The woman's house is only 20 meters away from the Sentry Tower." Flower spoke unhurriedly, but Barney's face became paler and paler, and sweat continued to break out from his forehead. His heart was beating like thunder, as if he were standing on the edge of a bottomless cliff. Barney felt his body feel sore. Flower leaned back in his chair and stared at him quietly, waiting for an answer. Aye. Barney was so nervous that he didn't know how to answer for a moment. But the next second, he seemed to think of something and shouted quickly as if grabbing a life-saving straw. "Lord Flower! Last night, it wasn't me who was on duty last night." "That's right. It wasn't me who was on duty last night. It was Colin who was on duty." As if to prove the persuasiveness of what he said, he turned back sharply, stared at Colin with resentful eyes, and asked sternly, "Why didn't you go on watch last night?" Flower raised his brows and shifted his gaze to Colin. Things have taken a new turn, and all the apprentices are looking at Colin and Barney with interest. "Night watch? What night watch?" Colin looked confused. "Barney, what are you talking about? Why didn't I know?" Barney looked at Colin's innocent expression, suddenly suffocated, and said, "I clearly ordered you to stay on duty on Saturday last week." "Sorry, Barney. I really can't understand what you were saying." Colin waved his hand and raised his voice to interrupt him. "If what you want to say is that you came to me to help you with night watch before, then I want to ask, did I agree? When does everyone go on night watch?" He pointed to the bulletin board on the wall not far away. "It's clearly written on it. My night watch date is every Friday. And last night was Saturday." He spread his hands and shook his head. Barney was furious, and he subconsciously said angrily, "I'm the deputy captain. If I give you an order, you have to go? You idiot who doesn't obey orders." "Huh?" Regina on the side suddenly laughed. "Oh, respected Vice Captain Barney." Her tone was full of teasing. "Ha ha." The other apprentices next to him also laughed. "I really think I am a person." "That's right, Vice Captain. How majestic you are." Upon closer inspection, these people who made noises were all transferred from the Mountain Patrol team. They are not afraid of Flower's displeasure. They know Flower much better than Barney. "I am following Lord Flower's order." Colin replied with a timely smile. "That's enough," Flower said calmly. He has figured out the cause and effect of the matter. He didn't care about the dispute between Barney and Colin, and he didn't care whether he wanted Colin to replace him on duty or how he asked Colin to replace him on duty. He only knew that according to his rules, Barney should be on duty last night. But there was no one on duty last night. Whatever the reason, from his perspective, it was Barney's problem. It's not that Barney shouldn't find someone to replace him on duty, but he shouldn't find someone to replace him. But he doesn't ensure that the replacement is good, especially when it's so important right now. Especially when the murderer's methods of committing crimes are very similar to those dirty bugs. Maybe, if someone was on duty last night, they could catch their tail. Flower sighed in his heart. This thought made him feel even more unhappy, and also made him decide to punish Barney severely as a warning to other monkeys. He glanced around at everyone impatiently and asked, "I have emphasized the importance of night watch to you before, right?" "Yes, Lord Flower." Everyone paused and responded in unison. Very good. Flower nodded. Then remember, Barney is your lesson. Master Flower. Barney felt something bad in his heart when he heard this, and his expression changed drastically. Barney, Flower said solemnly, you have been transferred out of the patrol team. Besides, you can go to the mountains to collect your punishment and go to the mines to mine for 1 year. Barney felt cold, and his face gradually turned gray. He didn't expect that the punishment would be so severe just for missing a night watch. Mining in mines involves digging magic stone mines. In the depths of the magic stone veins, along with a large amount of primitive magic energy, comes a strange, ferocious disease. Ordinary people will mutate and die within a day of being there. Although the wizard can resist, it is naturally not easy for an intermediate wizard apprentice like him. This is undoubtedly a hard job. But that's okay. What he really couldn't accept was that he was kicked out of the patrol team. The lab school has a perfect structure, but it also means solidification. Only by upgrading the level can one climb up, but he does not have this talent. So we fell into an endless loop. If we don't have talent to advance, we can't climb up. If we can't climb up, we can't get more resources and can't advance. We can't advance. Therefore, he spent a lot of effort to recruit the newly established organization of the patrol team, just to make meritorious service and to have more opportunities to climb up. But now, everything is ruined. Yes, Lord Flower, he responded in a low voice. Although no one spoke at this moment, he felt the eyes of everyone behind him were like rays of light on his back. I also had mixed feelings in my heart, and I wanted to escape from here immediately. But a figure gradually appeared in his mind. Colin. As soon as this figure appeared, the mixed feelings in his heart turned into anger, an incomparable anger. So, under the surprised eyes of everyone, he slowly stood up. Barney turned and looked at Colin. He took off the triangular silver badge he wore on his chest and threw it at him. Snap! The metal triangle badge made a crisp sound when it hit the floor. Barney! Flower frowned and shouted in a deep voice. Grown-ups! Barney didn't look back, just looked at Colin and continued. According to the rules of the school, when members of the same level encounter irreconcilable conflicts, they can throw down their badges and engage in a life-or-death duel. Right? He paused and then said in a resentful tone, I want to wash away the shame I have suffered. Lord Flower. Flower's face gradually turned cold. How could he not know what Barney was planning? He was just relying on his superior strength and wanted to use a duel to take revenge on Colin. I said, that's enough. He said expressionlessly, his tone soothing, but like the cold winter wind, Barney. Sir Flower. Barney couldn't help turning around and shouted, I just want to wash away the shame I suffered. Please agree. This time, not only Flower, but everyone around him couldn't help but frown. It's not Colin that brings shame to you, but your own blind arrogance. Flower held back his impatience. Barney obviously still doesn't feel it's his fault. In fact, if Barney had a position of strength like him, then there was nothing wrong with this idea. The fault was with Colin, who did not obey his orders. But alas, Barney didn't. His thoughts are arrogance, blind arrogance that does not match his own strength. Barney, I'm just saying this for the last time. Go back to the wizard and accept your punishment. But Barney looked back at Flower. His already thin and sunken face became more and more distorted, and his two carefully groomed mustaches were now like tangled weeds. Why? Why are you all turning towards Colin? Obviously, it was because he disobeyed my orders that this happened, wasn't it? He looked around, but all he saw was ridicule, and indifference. He gasped and struggled to squeeze out a few words through his teeth. I understand, Flower Court. I accept your duel. At this time, a gentle and calm voice came. He raised his head and looked at Colin not far ahead in shock. There was a sudden silence in the hall. Everyone's eyes were focused on Colin. With a calm face, the young man calmly took off the silver triangular badge on his chest and threw it forward. Barney's villainous behavior really makes him sick. To wash away the shame, huh? It seemed that he was the one who was at fault for not obeying the order. But why should I listen? Snap! The badge fell to the floor, bounced, and finally rolled onto the wood grain floor next to the triangular badge that Barney had removed. Flower raised his eyes and glanced at Colin, frowned, and said nothing. The next second, he slowly stood up from the recliner, walked past Barney and Colin, and walked out the door, his impatient voice drifting to the hall. It's up to you. If you want to duel, then duel. Remember to record it with the photo crystal. Crunch! The door of the inspection office was pushed open and Flower left. As soon as his huge body moved away, the sunlight rushed in through the open door. Barney stared at Colin bathed in the sun, and his heart was swept by ecstasy. He didn't expect that when he was about to give up, Colin would take the initiative to agree. For a moment, he couldn't restrain his excitement. He even wanted to go against the wizard's principles and thank the gods. Even under the backlight, Colin's face shrouded in dark shadows. In his opinion, it was undoubtedly a hint that the young man in front of him was about to die, and the winner who kills him. It must be yourself. Barney's twisted expression suddenly calmed down. He tried his best to make a solemn expression on his sour face, raised his hand, and performed an unknown aristocratic salute. But before he could prepare his emotions, he heard Colin urging calmly, "We're to fight. Time is precious." Barney was so dissatisfied that he calmed down and his face suddenly twisted. After a while, he suppressed his anger and continued to complete the noble ceremony. After thinking for a moment, he said, "The seaside to the east of the city is beautiful and suitable for burying you." He wanted to choose a place worth remembering for this duel. Colin frowned. He looked at the sweaty and disheveled Barney in front of him, who looked extremely embarrassed and even a little weird, and he was a little confused. Ever since he said he accepted the duel, Barney had become like this, seeming to be immersed in an inexplicable emotion. But he just wanted to quickly deal with the clown in front of him. No need. Colin shook his head. "I think the basement of the patrol office is fine. You must know that this is the west of the city, and the seaside to the east of the city is at least more than 3 hours' drive away. How can he waste so much time on this matter? You are just an intermediate apprentice who has just advanced. How can you have the confidence to talk to me like this?" Barney finally couldn't help it anymore and couldn't maintain the grace on his face anymore. So he asked, "Just advanced?" The apprentices who were still watching were also a little surprised. "Regina, I remember you and Colin were working on the same day." Barney said he had just advanced. "Is that true?" Regina nodded to her friend beside her and said calmly, "Let's go. There's nothing interesting to see, and I didn't bring the photo crystal." She turned around and left with her friends. After Flower left, except for a few apprentices who brought photo crystals and planned to make some money later, the rest left one after another. Not many people were interested in spending time on a duel that had nothing to do with them. After Regina left with her friends, a few more people left. Finally, apart from Colin and the other two, there are only 3 male apprentices left here. Barney looked at Colin's calm face, gritted his teeth, and said, "Since you were so anxious to die, then fine, go to the basement now." Colin nodded in disbelief. He couldn't relate to Barney at all. To him, Barney was just an angry villain. A group of people came to the basement. The bright crystals inlaid on the walls illuminate the entire basement like daylight. 2 magic stones per person. The remaining 3 people gathered together to discuss for a while and said to Colin and the other 2, "Okay." Barney spoke first. Colin nodded indifferently. The 2 magic stones for this person were a reward for recording the complete battle scene with a photo crystal later. The rap school has strict rules regarding duels. First of all, duels can only be established between members of the same level, and intermediate wizard apprentices can only duel with intermediate wizard apprentices. Secondly, from the moment the badge is thrown away, it means that only one side will survive in the end of the duel. This is about the dignity between wizards. In addition, the establishment of a duel requires the consent of not only both parties, but also the consent of at least one higher-level school member. Finally, during the battle, either there are higher-level wizards among the spectators, or at least 2 photo crystals need to be used to completely record the entire battle process. Flower's last words were obviously in agreement with their duel, but he also told them that they did not plan to watch the match. This is also the reason why the last 3 wizards stayed. Buzz! The photo crystals were activated by the 3 people watching the battle, and they recorded the battle from 3 different angles. Stepping on the cold stone slabs of the basement, Colin and the two stood at both ends. The air became inexplicably heavy. The two looked at each other, and Barney smiled ferociously at Colin. Be the first to take action. There was a flash of white light, and his figure suddenly disappeared. He stared at Colin, grinning and making plans in his mind. First adaptive mimicry, then approaching with nimble steps, and finally hitting with shadow spikes. He seemed to have seen Colin lying in a pool of blood. Laugh! 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 But at this moment, several slight noises suddenly came from the air. Immediately after 2 puffs, Barney spit out a mouthful of blood from his mouth, and his figure gradually emerged 10 meters in front of Colin, looking at the holes exploding on his chest and right side of his lower abdomen. Feeling the hard cone bullets ricocheting and piercing his body irregularly and causing severe pain, Barney looked in disbelief. But soon his eyes became dim. He fell heavily to the ground. Colin pocketed the remaining cone rounds. Then he took out 6 magic stones with some pain and handed them to the 3 apprentices who were holding the photo crystal next to him and had astonished expressions on their faces. After improving the ammunition of the arrow art, the power is obviously improved than before. Once hit, you will either die or be injured. However, he did not expect to be able to deal with Barney so quickly. This is probably because Barney did not perform defensive witchcraft. As for the reason why defensive magic was not used, perhaps Barney was overconfident in his adaptive mimicry's hiding ability and nimble-footed dodge. Adaptive mimicry is indeed very powerful, and you can barely detect anything out of the ordinary based on vision alone. But since the golden 4-leaf clover was strengthened, Colin's 5 senses have been greatly improved. Although adaptive mimicry makes Barney disappear visually, but the strong smell of women's perfume on his body obviously cannot be covered up by adaptive mimicry. Relying on his extraordinary sense of smell, although he could not determine Barney's precise location, he could still feel the general direction. So he directly used his arrow technique to fire several cone bombs in a covering the general direction, and then eliminated Barney without any effort. After all, the speed of the cone bullets fired by the arrow art has already surpassed that of many rifles in the previous life. Barney obviously couldn't react, even with his nimble steps. Perhaps I could barely avoid it later by relying on my reaction speed improved by the second limit-breaking sunlight breathing method, coupled with my light steps. After putting away the photo crystal handed over by the watching apprentice, Colin walked towards Barney's body, leaned down, and took off the black money bag from his waist. Opening it, I roughly counted that there were about 30 magic stones inside. Colin couldn't help but feel joy on his face. Not only did he make up for the remuneration he had just paid, but he also got a windfall. It's a pity. Except for the things left on the body now, the rest of Barney's inheritance will be confiscated by the school. This may be to avoid deliberate confrontation between members of the school in order to plunder each other's resources. Colin searched carefully again, but only found a few incomplete witchcraft manuscripts. It should be something that Barney has been researching recently. It is not complete and of little value. The next day, it was Colin's turn to take the shift. He came to the inspection office and prepared to hand over the photo crystal to Flower. Walking to the office door, he was about to knock on the door. "Come in." Flower's voice suddenly came from inside. Colin was startled for a moment, then pushed the door open and entered. But it wasn't surprising. After all, he didn't approach quietly, so it was normal for Flower to notice him. After entering, he was startled again. In addition to Berkeley, there were 2 other people standing in the spacious office. "Your Excellency Berkeley, Lord Price, and Captain Flower." He quickly greeted them respectfully. "But I feel a little strange in my heart. Why can I see Berkeley everywhere? And Lord Price is actually here this time?" Inexplicably, he thought of the last time he met Berkeley in Patton's office at the West Guard office. It stands to reason that Berkeley rarely appears in the west of the city, and Price is even less seen. Flower was a little surprised when he saw that it was him who pushed in, and couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you have a duel with Barney yesterday?" "A duel?" Berkeley on the side became interested and asked, "What duel?" "That's it." Flower briefly described the causes and consequences behind it. It would be wise not to accept the duel. Berkeley nodded at Colin, sighing inwardly. I never expected that a great opportunity would be wasted due to such reasons. Maybe, if someone is on duty that night, they can catch their tail. Maybe he really felt regretful. Berkeley sighed again. Well, Barney, I've seen him before. I've warned him a long time ago to recognize himself, but I didn't expect him to be so stupid. City Lord Price on the other side made a concise conclusion and added, the punishment of 1 year of mining is still too light. Flower nodded, as if he had thought of something. He turned to look at Colin and asked, So, what do you want to see me for? Colin finally had a chance to interject. He paused and said, Captain Flower, Barney is dead. This is the photo crystal from yesterday's duel. He took out the photo crystal and handed it over. Flower was startled and took the photo crystal. Berkeley raised his eyebrows and glanced at Colin. Even Price's usually calm face showed a trace of ripples. Flower opened the photo crystal. 3 projections appeared out of thin air and gradually converged, forming a picture whose angle could be adjusted. The 3 of them watched together. The battle process was not long, and it was played over quickly. After reading the photo crystal, they were all a little silent. It seems you have made great progress, Colin. After a moment, Berkeley was the first to praise. You are very talented in improving witchcraft. He recognized that Colin was using the same arrow shooting technique that he had exchanged with him, but it was obviously improved. Although I don't know how much it consumes, in terms of power, it is at least average among the witchcraft used by intermediate apprentices. I just have occasional inspiration. Thank you for your compliment, Colin said with a calm expression. When dealing with Barney, he did not use the true power of the arrow art. In fact, in order to hide the golden paper, he has been controlling the power of the arrow art since the limit of the arrow art was broken. Except for the time against the black-maned giant pig king, he only used his full strength when he was in his basement. And every time we will carefully handle and destroy the used iron targets. As for the black-maned giant pig king, he later went to see its body in person. Perhaps because of its strong recovery power, nothing could be seen at all. He was not worried that the 3 people from Berkeley would notice anything strange because of the image crystal. The specific changes in witchcraft are difficult to observe with the naked eye when casting spells. It is like a clock. All clocks can rotate the hands, but how many gears are used inside it is difficult to accurately judge just by looking at the appearance. All in all, as long as the complete model and theory of the arrow-breaking technique are not exposed, no one will be able to see that this ordinary arrow-shooting technique has changed beyond recognition. The reason why Berkeley was able to tell was probably because of the power of the arrow art shown in the shadow crystal, which was obviously different from the original, and the ammunition that was completely different from ordinary arrows' cone bullets. Berkeley smiled, as if he suddenly thought of something, turned to the flowers and suggested, I just don't know who to choose. How about asking Colin to help? What do you think? Okay. Price nodded calmly. Okay. Flower also nodded, and then explained to Colin. Colin, do you remember the murder I talked about yesterday? Remember, Captain Flower. Very good. What we want you to do is to assist Regina in investigating this matter. Yes. Colin nodded, not thinking anything was wrong. Since you are a member of the inspection division, you will have to be responsible for handling matters such as investigations sooner or later. Now it is just earlier. Regina is already at number 79 Tulip Street. Go find her. Flower said again. Colin agreed, turned and left. Thanks to Yuanshire, great immortal, blue ghost eyes, sleepless night, and deadly slide shovel with curry stick in hand for the 100 starting coin reward. In addition, many people are asking, when it comes to updating, new books will be updated twice a day to avoid unsatisfactory recommendations if too many books are released in advance. When Colin arrived, the gate had already been guarded by guards in plate armor. The passing crowd pulled away one after another, forming a vacuum in front of the mahogany gate. Colin made his way through the crowd and strode through the door. The guard at the gate bowed to him respectfully. The layout of this house is similar to his own home on Palm Street, but it is not a building but a single-story bungalow, and there is one more side house than him. The overall shape is inverted U, with 2 carved sections between the side house and the main house. The European-style white column corridors with rose patterns are connected. Step into the main house. In the center of the living room on the first floor, several guards were standing in front of Regina and talking about something. Colin. Seeing Colin enter the room, Regina was a little puzzled. "Why are you here?" She looked at Colin with a somewhat complicated expression. The final result of the duel yesterday morning was quickly spread by the 3 apprentices who left the record. Naturally, Regina also knew. She was a little surprised. "Regina, Captain Flowers sent me to assist you in investigating this murder," Colin explained. Approaching slowly, he handed Regina the paper Warrant Flower had given him. He clearly felt that Regina's attitude towards him was different from before. Sure enough, a low profile can't bring real peace. Appropriate displays of strength are also important. He knew it. "I see." Regina nodded after reading the warrant. Her face has returned to calm. "Let me take you to see the scene first. The murder happened on Saturday night last week, at about 3 to 4 in the morning." She led Colin to the side room on the right first. "Number 79 Tulip Street. There are 13 people living in the whole house, 1 mistress and 12 maids. 10 of the maids lived in the side rooms on the left and right sides, respectively. In the 6 rooms in total, only the mistress and 2 other maids of the night lived in the main room. Passing through the European-style corridor covered with beige floor tiles, the 2 came to the servants' room on the far right. The brown-yellow wooden door of the servants' room was open, and a strong smell of blood overflowed from it. There are 2 maids living in this room. According to traces, the murderers started killing from here." Colin approached slightly and looked inside. Inside, the bodies of the 2 maids overlapped crookedly and fell on the wood-grain floor, with distorted faces and protruding eyes. There's a huge hole running through the front and back of the left breast. Congealed dark brown blood can be seen everywhere, on the walls, on the bedding, and even on the ceiling. It looked as if a powerful monster had suddenly entered the room. With unparalleled strength, it violently pierced through the maid's left chest, pulled out her heart, and threw them on the ground like straw. "Pay attention to the floor of the room." At this time, Regina reminded. Colin cast his gaze. On the brown wood-grain floor, apart from the corpses of the 2 maids, there was a huge pool of blood, as well as some radioactive blood spots. "It doesn't look weird, no." Colin frowned slightly. These blood spots were splashed all around, in every direction, front and rear. But if the murderer pierced the maid's chest from the front, obviously there would not be much blood splashed out because of the arm or something blocking the front. But now, the splashing traces of blood on the front didn't seem to be blocked in any way. Looking carefully at the ground, apart from the maid's dark red blood, some brown dust, and a few strands of hair from the maid, there was no sign of anyone else in this room. No footprints, no smell, nothing. Even the door is intact. It's as if a ghost did everything. It seems that our murderer is invisible. Colin stroked the smooth surface of the brown wooden door and said after a pause, "Yes." Regina nodded and led Colin to the next room. "At first I thought it was a ghost, but the evil detection showed that there was no ghost aura. Or rather, there was no evil aura. There are no monsters, no ghosts, no evil things, no pollution, no traces of witchcraft. Nothing, just like an ordinary person doing all of this." She took Colin through a quick tour of the maid's room. Most of them are not much different from the first one, with wounds running through their chests and their hearts missing. But judging from the traces at the scene, it's more like a cult. Regina stopped in the living room and said. Colin nodded in agreement. "Like this regular heart out, most likely have another purpose." The 2 walked to the master bedroom. As soon as he entered the master bedroom, Colin frowned. On the big pink curtained bed, a naked female corpse had her legs split apart, showing traces of being violated. There is a leather chain with a moon pattern on the ankle, and it is connected to the wrist from the side. The chains were so short that her limbs were twisted. On the left chest, like the corpses of other maids, there is a big hole, and the heart is missing. The blood stained the bedding beneath him a dazzling dark red. There are traces of being violated, but nothing was left. Regina said lightly, frowning slightly. "I don't know if the murderer was motivated by sex or some kind of ritual demand." "Good morning," the 2 gentlemen of the lap school. At this moment, a hoarse voice suddenly came from the door. A wizard with a goatee came in following the guards. He had dark skin and few wrinkles, but some gray hair still revealed his age. "Good morning," Regina replied indifferently, turning her head and lowering her voice to explain to Colin. "Pigu is the owner of this house, an intermediate wizard apprentice, and the woman who died on the bed, Lisa, is his mistress." Colin nodded incredulously. "Your Excellencies, what do you need me to do?" Pigu asked. He frowned slightly, glanced at the dead Lisa on the bed, and sighed. He had already learned about it from the guards on the way here. At first he was very angry, but after seeing the weird situation at the scene, his anger gradually subsided. He was already old, and he just wanted to enjoy his last days peacefully, and he didn't want to get involved in this kind of incident, even though Lisa was his favorite mistress. "I need to know something about her," Regina said, pointing to Lisa on the bed. Pigu nodded and spoke slowly. According to him, he met Lisa 2 years ago and has been raised by him since then. He usually lives in the residential area outside the lab school on the mountain, and occasionally comes down the mountain to find her. The last time he came to Lisa was half a month ago. After listening to the narration, Regina pondered for a moment and asked, "Have you anything to suspect?" "No, since I got to know Lisa, she has been living here, and there are maids accompanying her on weekdays. If there is any enmity with anyone, the maid will tell me. At least until half a month ago, Lisa also never no enmity with anyone." Pigu simply shook his head. Although Lisa was his favorite mistress, she was just a plaything imprisoned in the final analysis. He knew her daily traces like the back of his hand. It was clearly not a vendetta from his point of view. Lisa, most likely just an unlucky ghost. On the other side, in the inspection office, the three of Berkeley were still talking. "How sure are you that they did this incident?" Berkeley asked Flower, tapping his fingers on the brown-red table unconsciously. "Only about 30%. Flower shook his head. "I went to the scene to see it. Judging from the appearance of the corpse, it looks a bit like their style. But I didn't feel the familiar, disgusting breath." Speaking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. This murder happened just after the pollution incident of Catherine at the West City Guard, and he subconsciously linked the two together. But after actually going to the scene to see it, he found that it was a little different from what he thought. "We'll find out later." Price, who was sitting on the side, said if it's really a flesh and blood thorn, then they will definitely take another action in the future. "What about Regina?" Flower asked. "Let them continue the investigation," Berkeley interjected. "Okay." Flower nodded and asked again, "Do you want to report it to Wizard Rap?" "No need." Berkeley shook his head. "Nothing has been determined yet. It is not appropriate to bother Mr. Rapp. This may just be an ordinary murder as usual." He turned his head to look out of the stained glass window, paused, and reminded again. "But don't take it lightly. The source of the pollution on Catherine's body has been determined by the Rapp wizard to be the Lord of Flesh and Thorns." Flower nodded heavily, and the fat on his neck surged in waves. The three said goodbye. Berkeley walked out of the inspection office. The sun is shining outside. The sky is blue. People came and went in Black Rock City. Calm, sunny as always, but no matter how he looked at it, he always felt that there seemed to be an undercurrent surging behind him. Asterisk, 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 79, Tulip Street. At the openwork door carved with roses, Pigu is saying goodbye to Regina and the others. "Your Excellency Pigu, if you think of any useful information later, please contact us as soon as possible." "It will," Pigu replied with a smile. "Then I'll go back first." He bid farewell to Regina and the two, turned around and boarded the carriage behind him. "Drive." The carriage drove him away gradually and finally disappeared at the corner of the street. Colin and Regina returned to the living room, sat on the apricot woolen sofa, and frowned at the same time. Pigu's answer did not provide them with any useful information. But no trace could be detected at the scene, and Regina's black cat could not smell any strange smell. The homicide investigation has stalled. Why don't you go back to the investigation office and look through the files of murders with supernatural factors recently recorded? After pondering for a moment, Collins suggested. Obviously, this homicide is very likely to be done by cult members, and there is a high probability that it is not a vendetta. And if it wasn't a vendetta, then from the investigation of interpersonal relationship, it is undoubtedly going in the wrong direction. In the current situation where there are no other clues except for the iconic ghostly leaving no trace, finding out whether there is a homicide related to it is obviously the only breakthrough. Regina obviously realized this too and nodded. He got up quickly and went back to the inspection office with Colin. In this homicide, the deceased was just an insignificant ordinary person, so it stands to reason that there is no need to pay too much attention to it. But because the incident itself involves extraordinary power, and it is likely to be related to cultists, this is no longer a trivial matter. It didn't take long for the two of them to come to the file room of the inspection office. The files here were all moved from the previous guard. Stored on the huge brown bookshelf in the far corner are all the murders with supernatural factors that occurred on the island in the past 60 years. In chronological order, the two flipped through each piece from now to the past. The sunlight by the window climbed from the table legs to the tabletop, then from the tabletop to Colin, and finally faded away. Until the evening, until after reviewing all the murders related to supernatural factors in the past year. But they still couldn't find a single incident similar to this tulip murder case. Not even a similar one. Night fell. In the end, Regina and Colin had to put down the files and return home by car one after another. Regina lived in the opposite place to him, and when his carriage reached the corner of Acorn Street, there was no sign of Regina. Go to Tulip Street first. At this moment, Colin suddenly ordered to groom Arthur with a thought. Yes, master. Arthur quickly replied, driving the carriage and turning towards Tulip Street. Not long after, the carriage slowly stopped at number 79 Tulip Street. Colin got out of the carriage. Outside the hollow gate carved with roses, there are still two armored guards standing guard. My lord. The two guards greeted respectfully. Although they were a little curious about why Colin came back so late, they didn't ask anything and kept silent. Open the door for Colin. But when Colin approached the door, his footsteps stopped. He waved his hand at the guard, then suddenly turned back to the carriage. Come on, Arthur, he ordered. Tap, tap. The carriage moved. In the carriage, Colin looked calm. The only reason he came back here was to confirm the inexplicable feeling he had this morning. When inspecting the scene this morning, although neither the detection of evil nor Regina's cat could find any traces, he always felt something strange. A very faint strangeness, so weak that he once thought it was just an illusion. It wasn't until after looking through the files in the afternoon that he settled down to think carefully that he gradually became sure that the strangeness was not an illusion. It stands to reason that he is just an ordinary middle-level wizard apprentice. Since Regina and her black cat didn't find any abnormalities in detecting evil, he shouldn't be able to find any abnormalities either. But he did find out, and it wasn't an illusion. Needless to say, this must also be one of the benefits of the strengthened soul. After the golden clover is strengthened, the improvement of his soul does not seem to be as high as that of his body, and he does not have the same talent as his body. But in terms of actual quantification, his current soul strength is undoubtedly one of the strongest among a small group of people on the entire island except Wizard Rap. In addition, the golden clover seems to have a special bonus to perception, and it is normal for him to feel strange things that ordinary intermediate apprentices cannot. However, the matter of obtaining the golden four-leaf clover still needs to be kept secret, and the strength of his soul, after being strengthened obviously, cannot be easily revealed. So after confirming the strange feeling in the afternoon, he didn't say it out. Instead, I chose to come back at night to take a closer look. But when he walked to the door, he was suddenly shocked. There is absolutely no need for me to come here alone now. At this moment, night had fallen. Only the two guards outside the huge house at number 79 Tulip Street were living people, and the rest were mutilated and terrifying corpses. A gentleman does not stand under a dangerous wall. If you want to double-check, it is undoubtedly a better choice to wait until tomorrow daytime, or to come with Regina next time and then confirm.